All right, I do believe we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Break the Rules stream. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov. Slava Ukraini! Slava Ukraini! Let me point in the right direction. There we go. Slava Ukraini! Have a wonderful weekend
That view
today.
is unendorsed by everyone on
This
BTR.
is a very interesting time to be alive. A lot of things happening in the world, but also movies are things that we used to get inspired by. So I think it is important to find out what exactly is going on in the cinemas today. Today is Oscar Day, and with us we have Kino Corner, Slush, Giovanni Pennacchietti with the fez on, and we are going to have Katherine Brodsky joining us as well to talk about why she is not really that much into movies anymore. I mean, that really does seem to be the thing on a lot of people's minds who I've talked to, where they don't even want to reach out and see if anything good is on anymore. They just accept the fact that everything is crap. There's nothing to be found of quality coming out of the Hollywood machine or even like the art film machine. I want to prove them wrong, and that's why I have with us these wonderful panelists. Or maybe I'll prove them right. Who knows? But Gio, you had a little intro about Kino Corner as well, so go for it, brother.
Oh, I just wanted to say, it's a pleasure. I remember a year ago, I think, or 2 years, yeah, a year ago, someone floated your channel. You said, "Gio, you have to watch Kino Corner," and I sort of pissed around a little bit. But then, as soon as I started watching, I think the first video I watched was actually the Salo video,
Of
and
course.
because I'm a big fan of Italian art house and art house in general. But I think, in general, Kino Corner, what you do is you are unafraid, I think, to be a movie. Like, what is a cinema channel? There's a lot of shameless grifters out there
Oh yeah.
who sort of are very cheap in their content, who have a thing, who sort of say, I mean, movie critics in general have always, as you pointed out recently, have always sort of been a foil for the big studios. But I think
hmm
what you're doing is very interesting because you're willing to go down avenues of thought that other ones perhaps haven't really embraced for a variety of political and cultural reasons. And I think that what you're doing is something very comprehensive, and you really try to, instead of, I would say, become my good friend Matthew the Stout. He's a very good artist. He said that what a not cinema, but what music reviewers do, like Mr. Fantano, is that they basically describe sounds in a variety
Yeah.
of ways. A lot of movie reviewers describe cinematographic motifs in very linear ways. But what you are doing is that you're trying to get somewhere and to get to a place that is behind the actual context of what is on the celluloid itself.
hmm
And I think that your appreciation of art house and your willingness to explore trains of thought that are not, especially among, like, movie reviewers and video game reviewers, very unorthodox and almost quote unquote cancel worthy. I mean, that's such a terrible term, such a shallow term. But
Yeah.
for
No, no,
example,
but well, yeah. Well, what is the
yeah.
canceling thing? Because I haven't really seen anything that, at least to my sensibilities, would be cancel worthy. But Kino Corner, what
Well,
would you say it is? Well,
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 we got to
I'll
get
say something.
Kino in here.
I
Yeah.
will say something is that I like sort of embracing the edginess of a lot of art house films, and I am pretty shameless in the fact that I love movies like Salo or Antichrist
mm,
or Irreversible or The House that Jack Built, and talk and and with my Antichrist video too. I mean, people still believe it's an incredibly misogynistic film. I don't believe that, and I don't think that that's the case. But back, and in my own video, I had the clip of Lars von Trier saying that he understood Hitler, and then I go to then defend Lars von Trier. Like, I mean, like it's
Well, what
obviously a
did he
joke when
mean?
he was saying
What
it.
did he mean by that? I remember
So
that
yeah,
situation, but
he became persona non grata at the Cannes Film Festival after he said that in his press conference for Melancholia. However, he was saying it in a joking way, but he was making a point that I thought was actually a good point to make, and I don't think should have been cancel worthy. He did get sort of canceled, what he was saying is that he could understand him as a person. But that is the job of a director, right? Is to understand the person, no matter how evil they are. And that's what he's saying. No matter how evil he was, no matter the bad deeds he did, he said, I can see him sitting in the bunker in 1945, and I can get into his head. I don't know why that was cancel worthy, considering that one of the greatest movies about World War II downfall is really just about that. Bruno Ganz playing as Hitler. I mean, it really gets into the head and the psyche. And I don't think that we should be scared to get into the psyche of people like that in cinema. I mean, Salo definitely does that, gets into the psyche of Jeffrey Epstein. Basically.
Well, Katherine, I'm curious what you think. Do you agree with that? I don't know how familiar you are with Lars von Trier.
Yeah, well, I agree with the general sentiment, because I think, I actually studied acting a long time ago. And one thing that you really learn is that you do get inside of people's heads. And sometimes these people are, quote unquote, bad people. And you still have to figure out, okay, how do you like that person? So like an actor would actually be and a filmmaker and a writer would be sort of all in this position where that's their job, and that's their craft and talent, is to understand what goes on in somebody's mind. And you know what, like, Hitler, while we can all agree, not a lovely man, but like, okay, but you know what, he was probably nice to certain people. He was nice to dogs. I've been watching videos of Putin visiting kids in the Can't Make-A-Wish Foundation type thing, and he seems very sweet with them. That doesn't make him a good person. But like, people are multi-layered, and it's really like, why do you even watch film or TV? You kind of watch to understand this human psyche more, and how we are all like very susceptible to some of these things too. I mean, we're not all Hitler, but thank God.
Yeah, I want to make sure that both Kino Corner and Slush get a chance to respond to the main topic. I want to make sure that we keep this going in a certain road here,
for sure.
which is about whether this perception that I think Katherine is feeling, and I'm also feeling to a certain extent, of the old school, Kubrick, Taxi Driver, this kind of Kino energy is something that we're only getting a mere fragment of, or all the people are dying off, the ones who have this energy, and we're just going to be left with a bunch of crap. I don't know, like, Katherine, I don't want to speak for you, but what is your general sentiment when it comes to the kind of repelling force you feel when it comes to seeing any movies today? And everybody subscribe, by the way. All the Kino people, all the Slush people, subscribe right now. Anyway, Katherine.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this quite a bit, because there is a huge level of self-censorship amongst artists, amongst writers. And I've talked to a lot of filmmakers and directors and writers who created some of these movies, actually. And they said, a lot of them have actually said, like, I don't think I would get this done today, like, either because it wouldn't make it through the studio system, because it's not, the characters aren't all pretty and tidy, or because they would just be too afraid to put that down on paper. And so some of these great works that have changed people's lives or have influenced people's lives just wouldn't be made today. And so we're seeing, like, in the studio system, it's very much about, money, I think, financial and safety. Yeah. So they know if they make a comic book movie, they know they can sell it, and they know they can sell it internationally. And I think that plays a big role. And then with riskier films, I mean, I think people are just much more afraid of the wrong thing. But if you look back at some of the greatest movies, I mean, these characters were not always wonderful people, right? It didn't make them either all bad and all villains, but like, people are complicated, and it's like, you can't reflect that anymore, and you can't reflect multiple points of view. So I think a lot of people are feeling like that edge, that free expression, that freedom to play is gone. And you see that also in writers' rooms. I've been told that, in certain writers' rooms, the whole idea is that you should be just free, right? To say anything you want, so they can play and build on. And now that's sort of gone, because there would be like this one person in the room who is going to report you. And so everyone else just, okay, that thought that I have, that random thought, which may be very stupid, which may be offensive, but sometimes it's necessary to build into something else.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen.
And the Kino Corner, do you agree with Katherine? What's your take?
Yeah, I agree. And I can speak from experience too. I remember, so I used to work as a script doctor, and I remember we had one script that did really well in the blacklist years ago, and it got to Paramount, optioned it, and it was kind of working its way up through Paramount. And this is how the studio system works. I learned about how the studio system works with scripts with this particular one, because this one got all the way to the top. Basically, it's like it goes to the intern, right? The intern says, all right, you got to make this change, because the guy above me is going to want that change. So then you do that, and it goes to the guy above them. And then the guy says, all right, now if it's going to go to the next person, you're going to have to do this change. So it's like it goes through this process where they just neuter the whole thing. I remember that one of the notes that we got was there was one or two uses of the word bitch in the script. And they said, look, the Paramount lady that's going to give the okay is a big time feminist, and she will throw it in the trash if she sees the word bitch in the script. And I'm like,
too much self-reflection there.
I'm like, what? I'm and I'm thinking, that's not even like that bad. Like that, you can say bitch in a PG movie, it's like, and the way that it was used in the script was in like it was like in a joking way. It wasn't like in an offensive way or anything like that. And besides, I mean, even if it was in an offensive way, I don't think that should be something that makes you just like one word to throw it away. It's like, this is, and it was at that point, I was like, we're in this sort of, at least that's how I felt. We're in this sort of almost like new Hays Code era, but at least with the Hays Code, there was like a list. Here's a list of things that you can't have, and here, whatever. With this, it's not really a list because it's ever changing depending upon whatever the political, social climate of the time is. But I don't know. A lot of the people that I met, I got really disillusioned with the entire writer system because most of them are pretty just, they don't think about it, they don't want to shake anything. They don't want to rock the boat.
Well, in relation to this, there was a movie review that you did of The Batman, which recently came out, and the only thing that I saw before your review was that particular section about the white cis-het patriarchy that Catwoman was complaining about. But at the same time, a lot of the impressions that I got from people who watched the movie was that, no, this is actually like a good movie, and it's the closest that would come to having like this art house Kino feel. So, Slush, you've seen this movie too?
I have, yeah.
So let's go to Slush. I'm curious, like, what you think, and then Kino Corner as well. But what do you think is the category you would put something like Batman in? Does it come close to any of the old school, gritty New York taxi driver type things, or is it just like water in the desert? Like, this is the best we can get, so we might as well just appreciate it.
I mean, I don't know if I would call the movie like art house or anything like that, but it was definitely unique for a superhero movie because it was like more of a noir detective movie than it was like an action movie, even though it was full of action. And I don't know, like I thought they did a really good job with it, and like in general, I feel like this era that we live in right now is temporary. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but I have a feeling that like this sort of climate where we're constantly like neutering our projects like that, like how Kino just described, is not going to be here to stay. And I think that like the desire to make good films is very much still alive, and you can see that in like independent films and stuff like that. And even there's people have found ways to make good movies that are like mainstream. If you look at like, I mean, you can argue how good of a movie it is, but if you look at Joker, for example, it's not your conventional like comic book movie. It's obviously like hugely inspired by Taxi Driver, but he basically found a way to like make a good movie about a character that is sort of like, people wouldn't want to make movies about characters like that these days, and he did it by making it a comic book movie. So I feel like people are just going to find creative ways to do it right now, and then eventually we'll sort of bypass this whole era.
There's creative, but then there's creative with a capital C. For example, I know I don't want to compare superhero movies to, like Stanley Kubrick or Kurosawa, but my question to everyone, especially Kino, is, do you think that anything today does come close to that level? Why is it that at least somebody like myself identifies so much with that particular level and sees it as being like this very high thing that so few movies today go to? Is this a bias on my part, or is it actually something real?
I think, okay, so a few things. I think there's a recency bias, but I also think that what at least I'm seeing in movies right now, and honestly, I think that a lot of the complaints that we have about movies right now all comes down to the gutting of the mid-budget movie. We're seeing movies that like are $100 million to $200 million, right? Mm-hmm. These are the big tent poles. They're putting more and more money into these tent poles. You're getting inflated budgets. I mean, they don't need to, like, $200 million is unnecessary. And it's like they spent $200 million on Spider-Man No Way Home and it still sucked. And and it still looked like trash. Yeah. It's like
but everyone's making Spider-Man in there. It's like,
dead Spider-Man.
Oh my gosh, that movie was horrible. That wasn't quite as bad as House of Gucci, but it was still bad. But then you're seeing on the other side, you're seeing movies that are made for about 1 to 10 million. So on the lower budget end, that's a lot of A24 stuff. Lighthouse was made, I think, for 4 million. The Witch for 3 million. They're made for Get Out, even though I didn't care for Get Out. I think that was only a $5 million budget. That's kind of the Jason Blum, the Blumhouse. It's like 5 million or below, and they're going to get their money back. So I'm seeing a bigger gap where we're not seeing these $30 to $40 million movies that used to be pretty prevalent. That were the prestige pictures. We get a few prestige pictures at the end of each year, basically to compete for the Oscars. But even some of the prestige pictures, if we're going to look at this year's Oscars, I mean, West Side Story, even though I really liked it, had a budget of $100 million. I mean, they are pretty. Dune is up for the Best Picture, and that was a huge budget movie. So even some of the prestige pictures fall into this tentpole now. We're not seeing as much mid-budget, but I think that there is a bit of a recency bias because the movies that we remember from the past are all the ones that have had staying power. And, if you go back to the 40s, they were making so many more movies in each year than we're making each year. I mean, exponentially more movies were made per year back during the classic studio system. And I got to tell you, a lot of them were kind of terrible. And even going in the 60s, 70s, 80s, still a lot of movies were made. I would say that what we've kind of encountered with this whole cape shit sort of culture is almost rhymes with what was happening in the 80s with this hyper consumerist media entertainment. But what happens is that what happened at the end of the 80s is this sort of independent resurgence, when you had movies like Slacker, Clerks, Metropolitan, Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And because people got so tired of this kind of watered down movies that were basically just made for, consumption and really didn't have much to them, I think we're at a similar breaking point. And usually when things feel this way in film, the film industry has been in the same spot several times in the past. We had it when sound was introduced. People thought cinema was going to die. They're like, how are they going to, everyone wants sound now. How are they going to do it? Well, they did it. TV was introduced. How are they going to compete with TV? Well, they did it. They introduced color. They had color before it, but they started shooting stuff in widescreen, anamorphic, CinemaScope, VistaVision. IMAX was created, a decade later, but that's using that technology from the 50s. And, and then as the studio system falls apart, what's going to happen? Well, they have all the young people in the 60s come in and creates new Hollywood. And then, again, it kind of gets to this breaking point. New Hollywood got to its own breaking point, which led to the 80s and this sort of making action figures. Spielberg, George Lucas, all this kind of stuff. Make movies that you can sell merchandise with. And then
kind of similar to Tarantino in a way, who with Pulp Fiction, he ended up becoming the new Hollywood, but the reigning champion of that, even if he started from more of an indie direction.
Yeah, exactly. So you see, and then in the early 90s, late 80s, it gets to its own breaking point. And you see all these independent directors come out, like Richard Linklater, Steven Soderbergh, Tarantino, the Coen brothers, they end up becoming the
Adam
new...
McGowan, yeah.
Yeah, they Whit Stillman as well. They end up becoming the new sort of... Wes Anderson, too. He was in this movement. They become the new sort of... gold, standard bearers of cinema. And now I just feel like we're coming to the end of that particular era. It's gone on for pretty long. And maybe that era kind of came to an end when Kevin Feige, I don't know how to say the Marvel guy, but you can feel it. You can feel it. And nothing ever really lasts. People think that stuff is going to last forever. It never lasts forever. Tastes change, and I think that things are being sped up now with the internet and with people who can share, because still great movies are being made. A lot of great movies are being made. Obviously The Lighthouse, but even from the last year, The French Dispatch, The Worst Person in the World, both fantastic films.
ETA's film was good too.
Yeah, Uncut Gems, good time. Like, you have the Safdie brothers. And the good thing about the internet is that we can share these movies with people, and they can, somebody can make a film in Bhutan, which I just watched that Oscar-nominated film, Lunana, Yak in the Classroom. It's pretty good, but it's crazy. It's insane, actually, to think that there's this little movie made in the mountains in Bhutan that I could bring up on Amazon Prime and watch for $3. And that's kind of what the internet has. And I think that we're going to get a more at least what I'm hoping for is a more decentralized system of entertainment, of filmmaking.
Yeah, I think... Oh, go ahead, Bob.
No, go for it.
No, I think that what's interesting is film is always a complicated medium for the auteur in general, because it specifically lacks like an aura of like the original creator. There's so much mediating steps between a vision of a film and how a film is produced. But that's like a time immemorial struggle. It's like what Roland Barthes said, how in a way cinema opened up what he called a cinematic consciousness as opposed to the unconscious, where it's
is it similar in a way to people who guide their who use their Twitter personality as opposed to being part of any kind of movement, like right wing, left wing, it's more just the actual creation of a film is so hard to have explicit direct control over. There's so many variables and moving parts. But you still kind of feel it, though. Like, you feel if a movie is a Kubrick movie or if it's a Kurosawa movie. So what is it about that? Like, how are they able to generate this kind of association with themselves, even if they have, like, all these people working on it?
I have an answer for that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the answer for that is part of direction, part of being a director isn't just being on set and saying, I want this, I want this, I want to get this shot, I want to get that shot, I want the lighting to look like this, I want you to perform like this. Part of the director is who they hire. You hire people because you know what they're going to bring to your set. You know that they're going to bring this element. They're going to bring their own personality to your set. So you hire people who you know fit into your vision. So even though so this is kind of where, I guess, auteur theory this is the idea behind it. Because at the end of the day, the director hired the person because the director wanted that person to bring that personality, bring their ideas, because he knows or she knows how this person operates and says that person can exist in my world. That is why I'm bringing this person in. That is direction in itself. A lot of there's a saying that most of directing is casting, and it's true. I would say that's true. Well, to a certain point. Some of us love to also just be like, I want to hold the camera.
Well, it's kind of similar again, I think, to online communities where the people that you surround yourself by, it's like they reinforce you, reinforce them. But to Katherine.
No, I think.
Real quick, though, I wanted to ask Katherine the following. I think, unless I'm mistaken, that you were working on Man in the High Castle, or there was some involvement you had with Man in the High Castle.
No, you're correct. I worked on Man in the High Castle.
All right, so what was your experience then in terms of how that whole thing was set up, the people who were around there? Was it an auteur type of production, or was it more of like by committee?
Oh, I mean, at the studio level, I'm not sure, but I know that like on the executive producer, so I was a unit publicist on the show, just to clarify, for a couple of seasons. And that show was, not a tour. I would not say that. It was a very, very good crew, a lot of world building. The detail that they went to was quite extreme. Like you can pick up a magazine and all the articles were written by the art department, for example. So the actor really felt like they were in this real world. It was a detail that I haven't seen anywhere else to that extent. I think what the executive producers and the people who had sort of the vision. I mean, it was definitely a studio production in many ways, but at the same time, there were like certain things that were important for them. Specifically, kind of going back to Hitler. What I thought was interesting in a conversation that I had with one of the showrunners was, some people didn't like that Hitler was humanized in that show. He was kind of shown as a human. And the reason that was actually important to do was because it showed people that, like, people kind of envision somebody like Hitler as this like fanatical, crazy guy. Well, and of course we would never follow someone like that, but he was actually probably quite charismatic and people liked listening to his speeches and it was very appealing. Evil doesn't come in this like obvious form.
He was a sensitive man. If he was alive today, he'd listen to a Depeche Mode, The Cure, The Smiths. Sorry, it's a terrible song I just cited. Don't worry about it.
I think people don't like people like Hitler being humanized because it makes them have to sort of interrogate themselves about whether they could be a follower of his or whether they have the potential to be someone like him.
Right, but how important is that? Because you should be interrogating that, because if you don't do that, when somebody like that does show up, you're more likely to follow because you're not going to recognize that, and you're not going to recognize your ability to do that, to be such a follower in yourself. And we see things. I mean, none of these things in history happen like, it's not usually an overnight thing. It's like little things, little here and there. And maybe you think that the leader is kind of cute and funny and charismatic and good with animals.
Wears a nice hat,
Wears a nice hat, yes, and paints really nice, paintings. And so over time, you're like, well, this guy, and then he starts, sharing some of these like little nuggets of extreme points of views, and you're like, well, maybe. And that's why you have to like understand people.
That's the game.
Right?
It kind of reminds me of how like there was a big controversy a while back when, because you know how Jordan Peterson is always like in controversy, and there was a clip of him on the H3 podcast where he was talking about how normal people end up becoming like violent Nazis or whatever back in World War II Germany, and he was basically explaining the process of how like someone can go from being like a regular person who you think is a good person and get slowly nudged with like an open door policy or like foot in the door type of thing into becoming someone that does terrible things. And he got into a lot of shit for that. And I think that it's like exactly the same thing that we're talking about here, where people don't like the idea of humanizing Hitler. And I think that what Kino said about like not wanting to interrogate, yourself, people not wanting to interrogate themselves, it really is at the foundation or the heart of why we see like this sort of black and white approach in social culture these days, where people sort of just are quick to lump anything into good or bad and act like there is no gray area, even though in reality, most things are in a gray area. And I think that comes from a lack of wanting to like deconstruct yourself, I guess you could say, just like really
It's uncomfortable.
But that brings up another issue, which is because we have the internet and because we have a lot of Zoomers who aren't really cinephiles from what I can tell. I mean, I could be wrong here, but a lot of them seems to spend a lot more time online creating their own things in Minecraft, and that's, there could be a lot of creative energy there. But the other problem is that if they are hooked up to this machine without that much nuance, do you notice, like, and this is for everybody, do you notice that the next generation isn't really caring that much about cinema or anything related to authorship, and they're just like on a whole different spectrum right now, and what that means
Well,
for
I
the
think
future of movies?
yeah, but I think what I was trying to say before is that when it comes specifically to the aura of a film, nowadays the biggest problem that, and it's kind of the cliche point, but it's really the commodification. It's really the culture, the sort of the internal logic of the culture industry is such that even when films arise that are very recently that are quite profound, there are still a litany of films that people would say are like pseudo profound, like Ari Aster, for instance. Like you have films that are specifically made because they sort of ring the right bells in the heads of critics. But when
Yeah.
it comes to the vast majority of Cape shit or whatever, they're still making a wager of these films are going to produce this much revenue and they're made for this budget. And really, and of course, now you introduce foreign markets and they're very good for the lowest common denominator and so forth. Then you have a situation where the very logic of the system itself is geared away from films that are taking a gamble on. Because, like, for example, Apocalypse Now was taking a huge gamble on, and for instance, for Coppola, many times almost destroyed himself and so forth. And I think that it's really the logic itself, and also it's the fact that streaming services have, in some ways, done a number on the exclusivity of actual Kino cinema, where movies are seen as sort of the same because you can view them on a streaming service and you can sort of very easily acquire cinema. And that does something to the effect of exclusivity on the part of the viewer, right? I mean, when you talk about these great films of the past that are sort of mid-range budget, but they have a huge impact, some of my favorite films are very incredibly low budget, like Canadian indie films that are quite maudlin and quiet and don't really particularly go anywhere. They're usually in rural settings, but that's for people that are, I guess, have a particular proclivities. But when it comes to like nowadays, even films that are highly praised by critics, I mean, there's still huge considerations of what is marketable and what is expedient, right? And it's the way people even view them, the way that we consume things in general. It's not, there's no effort in actually going out and seeking an actual high quality cinematic experience.
Well, that also
I want
kind
to
of goes.
counterpoint this.
Yes, okay,
All right.
go for the counterpoint. But
I
I
wanna
am also
counterpoint
curious
this.
about the Zoomer question. I think those two tie in together, though. So let's see.
So
We have to
I'm
have the
seeing-
final solution to the Zoomer questions.
I'm seeing some people in the chat saying how there are plenty of Zoomer cinephiles, and according to my analytics, that's true. A lot of most of my audience is between 18 and 25, so that would put them in the Zoomer category. I myself am on that cusp. I'm 27, so 94. That's kind of in between, in between Zoomers and millennials. But I think, yeah. So as far as like big time cinephiles, it's always been a little bit of a niche audience. And if we go back in history, we didn't really even think about movies as art until the French New Wave, until Cahiers du Cinema. It was seen, actually unanimously voted by the Supreme Court in something like 1915, 1916 as a business, pure and simple. So it wasn't even protected by free speech until the 50s. It was an Italian film that put that into question, and that got overturned. So we've only really seen it, in the mass culture as an art form for about 70 years, which makes it a very, very early or very young art form. And when you talk about novels, when you talk about music, they've been going on for much longer. And as far as like streaming services, I have my own problems with streaming services, but I do like some of this. Okay, so the things that I like about streaming services is that when you tell somebody you need to watch this movie, like this movie is fantastic, it's going to change your life. It used to be that you would have to wait until the cinema around you showed it, because home video didn't exist in the 70s. You had to wait and you had to go see it there, and then you would see it one time. And great, it's an experience in the cinema. I love watching films there. But I mean, most people, they're not going to find the time, or you just wouldn't watch movies. You would have a whole bunch of films you couldn't see because you didn't have the resources to do it. But now everyone can become a cinephile. All you need is, I wouldn't say Netflix account, but HBO Max or Criterion Channel, and then you can become a cinephile. But the thing that Netflix is...
No, that's a disaster. The democratization of art has been absolutely a disaster for the human race.
No, I may actually agree with Gio on this kind. I'm curious what you guys think.
But there's a second point to
yes.
this. There's
Go
a second
for the
point to this.
point,
It is the bad side of this, right?
There we go.
So I'm balancing it out. Is that how Netflix, how Hulu, Amazon Prime, how they make these films is that they want to keep you on their streaming services. So how they put the films on the streaming services and how they make the films is that they treat the films like content. And that is, for me, that is a big problem, is that it's like people say, why does Netflix make The Kissing Booth 2 and 3 and Tall Girl 2? Why are they coming out with these terrible movies? Why do they keep putting out terrible movies? And it's like, because people are watching them, because people go and they see 13 Reasons Why, and Netflix can guess it's probably a teenager or something like that. They want to put out another shitty teenager film that 13, 14-year-old girls are going to watch. So they put out Tall Girl.
No.
And then what happens is then YouTubers then make a lot of money by making all these videos going, guys, Tall Girl is so bad. It's so bad. Don't watch it. And then that just leads more people to Netflix to watch it. The complaining about it is actually, it's marketing, and Netflix knows it. That
it's
I mean,
kind of like clickbait articles too.
Yeah,
it's not so different from
exactly.
That.
The 12-year-old.
Well, like that was like the anti-SJWs back in the day. It was like, look at what this, like 10 different channels doing the same video on the same feminist in their basement talking about it. It's like
they're
same.
They're like the cops who arrest.
Has equivalent.
They're like the cops who arrest the drug dealers, but never the kingpin, so that there's more drug deals to be had and more money to be made for the police.
There's a show about that on Netflix, actually.
There we go. It all comes full circle.
Even like stuff that you can't get that was previously geography locked, like that I could see.
There still is plenty of that though. There's still plenty of that. And we haven't really gotten to a point where it's perfect. As I said, a film that I watched back in college when I was living in Ireland was a film called Landscape in the Mist by Theodoros Angelopoulos. Blew me away. And after I moved back to the States, I wanted to find more of his films. I couldn't. You can't find them in the States, not even online. I mean, of course, there's certain sites you can go to get them, but I mean, like legally, you can't find them.
The servers are in Latvia or wherever.
But this is a good thing because, I mean, like on Netflix, I've noticed that they are pushing out more foreign content because if they're already investing in it and people are interested enough and all they have to do is put on subtitles or maybe dub it, like that's an expensive way for them to sort of increase their catalog. And therefore people are seeing, content from other countries, which I just called it content, by the way. And then, the other thing is like, prestige, which was something that motivated studios to make sort of movies that weren't motivated by profit. It was about like, let's create that Oscar bait movie that's just a good movie that's going to get critical acclaim, which is why like, Miramax and all that. I mean, that was sort of their model in many ways. And
ever since Harvey Weinstein left.
Right, well,
we've been on a downward spiral since Harvey Weinstein left.
But it does.
Unfortunately,
But it does promoted that, you were talking early about that budget, that sweet spot where it wasn't like the 100 million, it was like the 20 to 30, 40 million movies. It's big enough that you can get a big star and have high quality production values, but it's like more story focused. Yeah. So like Netflix, because now they're sort of a contender in this whole Oscar thing and they seem to care about winning them, they have invested in certain movies where they haven't when they first began. So I kind of see that as a positive move. And if Amazon and Netflix are competing and Apple's now sort of a contender too, their content is getting better. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, but do people care about the Oscars anymore though?
Hey,
Yeah,
look,
well,
I'm
this is the
tonight.
Oscars. Yeah, so you better
I'm
care
stre-
about the Oscar. You
I
better
care
check
about
out.
it very much. I
And
care
then,
about it very much.
and then
Oh,
after
man.
watching Kino Corner stream, what you should do is you should pay money to watch the Tim Heidecker. The On Cinema. I don't know if you're
on
familiar with
cinema
the.
at the cinema.
Yes, it's one of
Yeah.
my favorite
No,
universes.
no, do not give
Yes,
Tim Heidegger
yes.
anything.
5 bags
Fuck
of
him.
popcorn.
5 bags of let me get some popcorn. But
Give Sam Hyde your money over Tim Heidegger.
I know Sam's Hyde kind of overrated. I like Tim Heidecker more.
God.
I'm not supposed to say that. But anyway,
You aren't supposed to say that, dude.
I am not supposed to. I don't give a fuck anymore. Anyway.
I'm gonna at him, and he's gonna fight you in the ring, dude. Hassan turned him
man.
down.
No, I had
He'll fight Lev.
I had Charles Carroll on BTR a couple of years ago. Anyway,
He challenged Hassan Piker to a fight, I think, recently.
Yeah, Hassan whisked out.
well, he also challenged iDubbbz to what was it? To not bench press,
They,
to
no, but they
squat.
actually did spar a little bit.
Squat
but-
200 pounds
Below parallel.
Below parallel, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, Catherine, I want to get back to the subject here. I want to steer this ship back in the right direction. So other than the things that you mentioned with this censorship, what are the other reasons why you were totally tuning out? You didn't even watch In the Name of the Dog. You didn't even watch In the Name of the Dog, Catherine. What's wrong with you?
And I don't think it's I know, and that was the only one that I was like kind of interested in, and only because it had dog in the title of it. So, I mean, there's still films that I kind of want to watch that I should, but I think a lot of it for me was also about the experience of going to the cinema or having a community. Like I worked in film, so I was hearing about films all the time. We usually would go to like the Toronto Film Festival, and that's where I would sort of see most of the films for the year, and I get bragging rights that I saw them early, and I think that environment for me was like an essential part. And then, of course, with the pandemic, everything got shut down, and I have not been to a movie theater in this whole time. And so that kind of took away a lot of my love for going to the movies and seeing films. And then I got used to this sort of snippet format of TV shows, which have gotten so much better and really interesting. I watch a combination of high level sort of TV shows and very lowbrow to like trash TV, as I call it. And I kind of enjoy both. And I think my mind has almost been reprogrammed to watch things in these, even though I'll watch one season from start to finish in a marathon very often, but something about a movie and sitting through a movie is just like not appealing in the same way. And I'm also not seeing things like, because the community aspect of it isn't there for me. So I'm not hearing about these films. Like I don't even know what's nominated for the Oscars. And I was a film writer for, over 10 years. And
Catherine, I have a challenge for you.
Okay.
And this is going to put your mind, your brain back on track, okay, to be able to watch films. Go to the cinema and watch Satan Tango by Bela Tarr in one sitting. And that'll
How
set your
long
mind
is
right.
it? Is it like 10 hours long?
Well, close, 7.5.
Oh God.
Oh, that's like Nymphomaniac. Yeah, that's
I actually
that was a harrowing watch.
Being
I can probably do it in a movie theater. I have a hard time doing it at home.
What you
There's
just
all
said
these
about like
distractions.
people like, or about you feeling like you're like reprogrammed to watch TV shows. I feel like that's like the sentiment of like everyone I know now. Where anytime I suggest, hey, let's watch this movie, 99% of my friends will be like, oh, a movie? I don't want to sit through a movie. But like if it's a TV show, like we can watch like 5 hours in a row and it doesn't matter for some reason.
I think it's because in a movie they think of it in bigger chunks, right? So you're like, oh, it's 2 hours. But in a TV show, it's like, oh, it's only 45 minutes, 50 minutes. But then they'll watch 5 hours of that. But they think,
but a movie is a self-contained unit as well. I think
a movie's a self-contained thing. And it's not like at the 45-minute mark in a movie, you're going to get some cliffhanger that's going to, I mean, the Netflix films or Netflix shows are all like kind of something, sort of something happens. And then like at that 50-minute mark, they give you the cliffhanger for the next one that makes you go, I got to watch the next episode. And then you kind of get 50 minutes of like, yeah, something sort of happens and whatever. And then it's a cliffhanger.
Well, and like, I think also for me, I find because TV has a lot more room for character development. So it's really character driven, and film is more like visual story. I mean, characters obviously play a role too, but depends on the movie too. Some movies, it's not really about the characters. And so I think you develop more of an intimate relationship when you're at your home, you're having this relationship with these TV characters if you like them. And so you're more prone to sort of continue living in their world and staying with them. So I think there's something to that as well psychologically.
What about
Yeah.
think of like the idea that like cinema isn't on the downswing, but it's just migrating to television or to TV series?
I don't think it's migrating to TV.
No.
I don't think it's I don't think it's migrating to TV. I think that, you know, they have separate things. I think what's just happening now is that movies that would be like 4 hours long are being turned into miniseries. But I don't think that movies are necessarily migrating to TV, because I think that a lot of filmmakers would, in a lot of cases, I know people that really want to make TV, and I know people that really want to make movies. I don't know many people that want to make TV but also want to make movies. You know, it seems to get a different I don't want to say audience, but different groups of people on the behind the scenes thing that I've at least met and talked to.
Different experience making it, because like
it's very different.
Yeah,
and you can make different things. And you can make different things too, because like I sort of ask myself this about TV quite often, but like, how would you could Tarkovsky's Mirror be a TV show? It's like, no, you couldn't do that on TV. There's so much that you can do on like TV. To me, I mean, it feels more character focused, but it's much less visually interesting. Usually, a lot of times there's a lot of fluff. That's why I don't like watching. There are some TV shows I like, but even in the shows that I really love, like Breaking Bad, there's still quite a lot of fluff.
Yeah, but it's different. I mean, you are starting to get more of a cinematic experience, but the big difference between film and TV. So the director in a film really he's the auteur, right?
Yeah, and it's the showrunner in a TV.
The showrunner. So if you come in to direct, you're not directing usually multiple episodes, or you're alternating. So it's a completely different experience, and you're moving at a different pace as well.
Yeah, but do you want a cinematic experience while you're looking at a TV show? I think that's people generally want more of a character-driven thing. Like it's not.
Well, also in terms of the audience today, I know that Kino, you were talking about how the majority of your audience is in the Zoomer generation, but how much of your audience, you know, and you have definitely a sizable audience, don't get me wrong, but in terms of the amount of Zoomers that are doing other things, how many are the film watchers in comparison to the previous generations? So that's more of kind of what I'm trying to find out.
I would say Zoomers are more open than us millennials. Like I just think millennials are done as a generation. That's just me, though.
Yeah, I notice. Like, I mean, when you're thinking about like Zoomers, and especially the Zoomers who watch me, which a lot of them are in film school or they're studying film or studying, I don't know, some sort of like they're in some sort of like arts groups, you know, and something like that. So that's who I interact with when I interact with my subscribers most of the time. But you know, they like. The Marvel stuff, I mean, that is kind of out of the millennial generation that was initially made. I mean, same with Harry Potter, right? Yeah. That's like a millennial thing.
Well, that's why I'm not putting any of these into the category of things Zoomers are into. I like what Tim Dillon said, where he was talking about how now you have all these Minecraft YouTubers out there, and they're constructing their own stories, their own various situations that resonate with their audience. But part of me thinks that whatever story they're going to create there, I'm not sure how exactly that's going to keep up to the level of the Kurosawas of the world.
It's not.
And do you think it's going to, because certain films like Kurosawa's films, like I think that is the kind of movie you want to watch on a big screen, and you want to be in a theater and you want to be in the dark. I mean, I understand we're all getting bigger TV screens and all that, but there's a limitation.
I don't think so. That was like an early 2000s thing, people having bigger TV screens.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
bigger than it was anyways. It's like not a bad TV screen, but it's like, does that kill you know, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to make the effort to go out to the movie theaters, and I'm paying for all this entertainment, you know, like I've got all these subscriptions. Like, do you think for certain kinds of films, especially the kind that you seem to write about, art house films, like, are they going to lose their audience just by virtue of people like just not going to the cinema?
Well, I mean, cinemas are trying a lot of different things to get people to go to the cinema. I
Just
live
like the church.
Yeah, I live close to an Alamo Draft House here in Austin, and there's always a lot of people there. You know, but Alamo Draft House has its own like perks. You know, that it's like a mix of a restaurant and a cinema. They do screenings on film, and of course, here in Austin, we have the Austin Film Society that shows. I think they're going to show a whole bunch of Kurosawa films on film this next month. So, and people still go out there. You know, like they had a packed audience a few years ago when Linklater put on a retrospective on Bresson, who is probably my favorite French filmmaker, French director. He's in my top 5 of all time. Of course, that's why I made a video on him. I'm a bit of a fanboy, but you know, they had a packed house. They had a packed house when he did a retrospective on Bresson. And it's like, who would have known that, like, for a movie like L'Argent, you know, 1983, just weird French art film, that you would have a sold out audience. So, you know, I think that people still like it. I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey in IMAX, and there was quite a few people at the cinema, and that was an amazing experience. I would say if you can see 2001 on a big screen, definitely go do it. And
another great one, by the way, is Lawrence of Arabia. I saw that on the
yeah.
big screen in 4K. That was the colors, amazing.
See, I think what's going to happen is they're going to, and I can see that in how the cinemas are trying to market things. They're trying to create event experiences more.
Yeah.
So I think
they have to, yeah.
Yeah. So the community thing. So for example, I know in Canada, the Cineplex chain, they've been really good at developing like these mailing lists, and so they know like, okay, they're going to play Bollywood film, and we won't even know about it, but these people will, and they'll come, and it will be like a sold out event. So I think they're trying to do it that way. And I think something that people are lacking, especially in this digital age of, you know, metaverses and all that, is that sense of community. So I think that's probably how they're going to do this. In that, the theater that you mentioned in Austin, I mean, I suspect a big part of why you have that culture in Austin, first of all, it's like this cool indie film culture. And then that particular theater is known for that. And so you have that community, and you have that cultural practice almost of going to the theater.
Yeah. And this is kind of how I see movies going forward, is that for most people, like your average person, they'd rather watch it at home because, and
yeah,
unfortunately, but our lives are so busy. You know, gas prices are high. Like a lot of people are going to say, like, I don't want to drive to the cinema. Like, you know, it's $4 a gallon. It's $4 a gallon here. It's $5 or $6, depending upon where you are. I don't want to drive out there to see this movie. Yeah,
and less likely because you might have kids too. So
yeah, you might have kids. I'm actually all for Disney putting all of their films on Disney Plus. Keep the kids out of the movie theaters. Like, and honestly, you know, that's better for the parents too. Like, a parent doesn't want to have to round up their kids and all their kids' friends, bring them to the movie theaters, and then possibly have problems or something like that. Have them at home, put on Encanto, which I didn't like, but whatever. Put on Encanto, have the kids watch it there. It's a lot easier, even though, but those movies are, you know, they're made for like $150 million. Those are really expensive movies, but I see it as being like, there's going to be 2 different ways of seeing things. People are going to go to the cinemas to see spectacle films. And then they're going to go there, and then they're going to go there for events. And you're definitely going to have the indie sort of art house existing in that in between for, you know, distributors like A24, Neon, Magnolia to put out their films. And I know that those films tend to do pretty well. Neon films have been doing really great. If people don't know what Neon is, it's basically the competitor to A24 now. They released Possessor by Brandon Cronenberg. They released Parasite, Pig, The Worst Person in the World, Flea, all these films have done pretty well, especially for the kinds of films that they are. Pig did super well. People were raving about it. Yeah, so I see like these indie cinemas kind of doing this, and I know AMC now has this thing called like AMC Classics, it's some sort of thing that they do where basically they'll put like one of their screens that they're not using, and they'll play something from one of these distributors. Or Sony Pictures Classics is another big one that they'll play one of these like prestige movies or indie films that have been doing okay or whatever financially. But even then, if you go to an AMC at AMC, no one's really going to be watching those films.
And what do you notice as far as animation goes? Because you did a recent video about the Smiling Friends, which I really dug. In fact, I'm in animation, and I know people who were working on that movie, and some of them may actually be watching the stream right now. But anyway, Smiling Friends is a very interesting thing that's occurring right now, where you have people from Newgrounds. You have people from Newgrounds who are now coming into the fore, as opposed to, you could say, like the CalArts kids, like the Steven Universes and all that. So I hope that this is going to create some kind of a new wave of animation. But what do you notice that's been going on with not just movies, but animation specifically?
I don't keep up with animation as much. I watch Smiling Friends because I've been a big fan of Psychic Pebbles and Michael Cusack and like that whole crowd of people since they were on Newgrounds. I mean, I remember watching David Firth's Salad Fingers when I was in middle school, and everyone was sharing it, being like, this is so creepy. This is so weird. You have to watch Salad Fingers. And this is back when he first put it. I think he even had his own website for it that had a Flash player. That
was it fatpie.com or?
Yeah, Fatpie, yeah.
And it had to have like the indent in the name, or else you'd go to a porn site.
yeah. So I've been a fan of all these guys for a long time, but I don't keep up with animation as much. Animation's a very expensive industry too, and actually the fact that they made Smiling Friends season 1 they claim the budget of one episode of Family Guy, which is around $2 million, I think. But
the whole show.
The whole show. But that actually puts into perspective Family Guy, that 23 episode season, that's $46 million. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
Make that
for
money.
a pile of crap, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of waste that ends up going into the animation process. But with something like the Newgrounds animators, these are people who are used to being in this kind of environment where it's not really like a 9-to-5 job. It's more of just like this. Well, it's an art. It's just something that they do.
They should give Adult Swim should give Emily Yukis a series then.
Oh man.
After
what ended up happening with Emily, I doubt it. But I did get high with Emily back in 2016 and the Newgrounds Pico Day Festival. But anyway, getting back to the main point here, with animation, I noticed that there are people like John Lasseter, for example, who I know that there was that controversy with him. The Me Too, he got Me Too.
He hugged somebody. Never hug anybody.
You have to count. It has to be under 5 seconds.
Yes. Well, this is also why we have some actors out there like, this is going to be so shameful. Who was the star? Keanu Reeves. So you have Keanu Reeves who's doing this hover hand thing with all the women that he's in a photo with. And, smart man, like he's taking precautions early on to make sure he's not going to be affected by the Me Too. But anyway, when it comes to John Lasseter and others he's bringing on board from Pixar, it almost feels like with their new, Dreammaker Entertainment, something like that, with their new studio, they're doing what Pixar used to do, while now we have this legacy Pixar that's kind of turning into, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're making okay things, but
no, they're not.
They're not? Okay.
They're not.
Well, tell me what's going on, because see, I'm so
I grew up with Pixar.
So I grew up with Pixar too.
Yeah.
But I'm so not interested in looking at their new things. Why? Why am I not interested?
There's nothing interesting. They lost their soul after Inside Out.
I noticed Soul was good.
This is why
that
Zoomers
sold-
would rather watch anime. I think that's probably
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first got blackpilled on Pixar was when The Incredibles 2 came out, because I loved The Incredibles as a kid, and I was excited to see, because Pixar, I mean, like in the 2000s, right? They had like Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Wall-E, Up.
They also didn't put out movies that frequently back then. It was like once every few years.
Yeah, it was once every 2 years, but they had just, I mean, that was their golden decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was the 2000s, and it was all original films, or mostly original films, and then they came out with Incredibles 2. I don't know what came out first, Monsters University, which was just like a G-rated version of Animal House. I was like, what is this? And there's nothing to it. There's no like spirit to it. There's nothing to hold on to. I just feel like I just felt like I was watching a watered down Animal House. Like, I'll just watch Animal House, like it's a better movie. And then Incredibles 2, and I was like, because Brad Bird he said like, I'm not going to do Incredibles 2 unless I have a really good story for it. So I made the mistake of trusting him, because Incredibles 2 was just the first Incredibles story, but gender swapped, and it was made even stupider. And I remember watching that and coming out of it with my friend, and we're just like, that was terrible. That was awful. Why would they make this? This was like it was a cash grab. And
so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think that part of why we're seeing sort of mellow works that don't have real soul is because nicer people are making them?
No.
No, I think
No, I think it's meaner people, because the thing is that here's the thing, is that the really nasty people, they're the ones that are like, we got to be wholesome. We got to be like, make wholesome stuff and whatever.
Wholesome chungus.
Wholesome chungus. That's the nasty people. The nice people, I'm not going to claim to be nice, but the nice people like to exercise their demons for everyone to see and be like, look, I'm using this to exercise to get through these bad thoughts of mine, right? I'm using these to, like, I assume that Lars von Trier is a pretty nice guy because of how fucked up his movies are.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you that Vincent Gallo is the coolest dude on the planet because of how fucked up the Brown Bunny is, right?
Yeah, the Brown Bunny though, but see, the critics, they pan the shit out of it, especially Ebert. But like that movie is again one of those indie films I think has space and has a sort of quietism to it. But that's what I mean. I think like there are a lot of like for example, the earliest Adam McGowan films are sort of like they have
one of my favorites right
there you
here.
go.
I happen to know that the person you're currently speaking on, so I can tell you if he's nice or not.
Oh, really? Is he?
Wait, Catherine, you know?
You need to describe.
Vincent Gallo. Well, my friend said.
Catherine,
my friend said
Adam McGowan.
Oh, Adam McGowan.
Oh my God, he's like my favorite actually.
I really like
is like my favorite film.
He made that one movie about the Armenian genocide, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
what?
Wait, so is Adam nice or not nice?
I'll tell you later.
All right.
I
In
knew
fact,
it, I knew
patrons, if you subscribe to patreon.com/break the rules, Catherine is going to spill the beans in
We're
private.
gonna interview him. No,
Yeah.
I think that it's well. I mean, okay, you take Lars von Trier, right? And it seems that there's certain films that are at a level where they're sort of popular enough to be known as like, oh, this is a fucked up film you have to see. But then it's like the nuances of it get washed away in this is just a fucked up film that people see to get, it's like watching, it's like a death match in wrestling. It's like, it's like, let's see the light tubes come out. I think like that's unfortunately, I think people really in some ways don't want like, they want to feel like they're watching a profound movie without watching it. It's not like compare Tarkovsky to Ari Aster, right? Like that's like I would call it the Redditification of cinema, in that you want that same cultural signifier of knowing that you're watching something of high quality without grappling with something deeper or more, not necessarily disturbing, but something that I guess is harder to grasp.
Well, you want others to know that you are
you're
one of the people.
Yes,
that
I'm
you're the guy
Jared
reading a
Nick or
book on the
whatever.
subway. You want that cover to be seen by all the other people
You're
in the
a very
subway.
sophisticated person. But I want to go back to the asshole thing because I was reading a hit piece of somebody that I happen to know that I think is a nice person, but the hit piece suggested otherwise. But you can read that hit piece and you can read it in two ways. You could be like, this is a creative genius who's going to push me and probably make my life miserable, but we're going to create something really good together, really powerful. Or you can read it and this guy is an asshole and I don't want to work with someone so difficult to work with.
I mean, plenty of people who've worked with me might tell you that I am an asshole. And I can say that maybe I was an asshole to them, but sometimes, I don't know, everyone kind of operates differently. I don't think that...
Like Walt Disney, Hayao Miyazaki. I bet Hayao Miyazaki's a tremendous asshole. I just see all the details in a spirited way. Yes, he is.
I think you have to be an asshole to create good content, but I think you have to be willing to take risks and push things and kind of get your way and stand by things. And if you're just trying to please everyone, then, you're not going to be able to do that. And there was a filmmaker that I talked to a while ago, and she did have a bit of a reputation for being an asshole. And she said, I'm difficult. But like at the end of the day, the studios, everybody else, like they're not going to care about this film in a few years, but I'm going to live with this for the rest of my life. So
yeah,
but there's a difference between being difficult and an asshole, and I think like I'm not like promoting a hostile.
I think too that people put too much stock in like the personality and the personality of the filmmaker, and and they get these sort of tabloids of like, oh, this is like, I remember the whole Christian Bale meltdown on Terminator Salvation. He was right. The cinematographer fucked up majorly, lost him a lot of money. Christian Bale was right to scream at him. The person who was in the wrong was the person who was recording it and leaked it. That shit happens all the time. It's like, why are you going to record it and leak it? I mean, the real asshole in that situation, I think, is the leaker. Unless maybe the leaker wanted Shane Hurlbut to get even more humiliated to show that how he was acting unprofessional on that set that day. But it's like, but you get these glimpses. It's all sort of like a simulated sort of relationship with the filmmaker, with the actor, whoever.
Exactly.
And then this persona, this fictional persona is created of this person. And it's like, wow, Kanye West is an asshole. And it's like, maybe, but who cares? Honestly, who cares? Like, I think his asshole thing is actually charming.
Yeah.
I mean, you care if you have to work with that person, then you care. And I have worked with assholes, so
I
think it's a cultural pastiche. Like, that's the problem, is that it's plagued art from time immemorial. Where, well, no, actually, I should say only like really the 20th century when cinema, or rather,
actors
my
were
world as an
considered
artist,
to be like lower than prostitutes in ancient Greece, weren't they?
Yeah,
like there was a different.
Yeah. I wrote an article actually about that called Reprobate Hollywood. That was like back during our magazine days. But no, what I mean is like in my world, in the art world, it's like the Effent Terrible is sort of like that image from Picasso onwards of this is like the bad boy of the art world. This is like, in cinema is no different. The sort of like art house, auteur being like an egomaniac and a control freak or whatever. Like that's a cultural pastiche. I think that it's like, it's a marketing tool fundamentally.
Yeah, and it's fun to play into. Like, let's not pretend that it's not fun to play into that persona. I mean, even as a smaller YouTuber, I sometimes play into that persona because it's fucking fun. It's a good time to act like that. At the end of the day, of everything that I do, I'm my own worst critic, and I'm always very insecure about things that everything that you make as an artist is you're making yourself incredibly vulnerable. Every artist hears every single bit of criticism that's levied their way from one outlet or another. And it's a very vulnerable position to be in. And that kind of playing that character, adopting that persona of the egotistical asshole is fun and it's a little liberating, and it helps you deal with that vulnerability that you
But I do think that you need. I don't think that. I don't really have respect for people being just assholes in a sort of a working for no reason. But what I do think is kind of necessary for an artist and a great creator that I think all of them sort of have in common is like that ability to stick by their vision. Because if you look at so many projects you hear about where like they constantly got rejected or they were told to change certain things and they refused to change these things, lost out. But then in the end, the things that the audience remembers the most are these like special moments that happen because that person just had that vision, maybe couldn't even explain it. Because sometimes it's just this instinctual thing, right? And you but you're like, I have to do this. And then you watch it and that's what you fall in love with. That's what makes that movie memorable and classic and all that kind of stuff. And you have to have that. And if you don't have that, I think that's why we're seeing, because a lot of the people who are sort of being promoted right now, they're playing ball within
they're corporate stooges.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's the Star Wars energy that I'm kind of noticed with the reboot of the Star Wars series. It does kind of make me look at the prequels with a different view, where you don't appreciate what you have until it gets replaced by something even worse.
Look,
no, but think of it this way, Lev.
General Grievous fight was Kino. Okay, General Grievous fighting Obi-Wan better than anything in the sequels.
Well, what about those transitions?
Star Wars is the ultimate, in my opinion, it's the ultimate neoliberal franchise. It is the mythology for the Bugman. It is the like your kids grew up with it.
No, hold on, Gio. No. Here's why I disagree.
There you go.
If you're talking about Campbell, and like the hero with the 1,000 faces and all that stuff, that is within Star Wars too. So I see it more as being like the blind man and the elephant.
But it's specifically a bastardization of Campbell. That's what makes it so compelling. Is that it just has enough like in terms of mythos to create like Redditors having like Star Wars weddings, like that's naming their kids Anakin or whatever, like that's.
But it's still funny how George Lucas came out of that same circle of directors, that ended up achieving a lot more artistic recognition than Lucas, and Lucas was kind of stuck with all these cosplaying Star Wars fans. But I don't know, I guess it worked out for the guy.
Well, rich.
Yeah, there we go.
Well,
I mean, what you were saying, before you were saying how you had this experience in Hollywood where like the people were changing your script constantly and they kind of went through committee, which you see that in other creative industries as well. And it's like it does kill its soul. But I feel like more and more there's this sense of like, we're going to hire people who think like us, who get along with us. We're going to go along with it. And it's kind of like politics. Like if you're starting out in politics, right. So if you're starting out in politics, the way to get promoted is to just go along with the official party line. And then by the time you have any power, you've already compromised so much. And it's the same thing in film and in Hollywood. So, you make that change to your script. You might have been like a talented writer or director or something, right? But you make these changes, you compromise. And over time, you maybe like lose the fight in you anyways, or you never had it. And so what you then see happen is like, unless you're getting, those risks happen at those lower budgets still that you're saying, like the art house films, but middle or like higher level, maybe not so much.
Okay, I'm gonna white pill everybody here, all right? Because Hollywood, like the people that I know that are these corporate stooges, I mean, like they're gonna make good money. They're gonna make good money. They're gonna be able to live in LA. I mean, I don't know why you would want to. I lived there for a little bit. I got the hell out as soon as I could.
You and Glink living together now.
Yeah, I'm actually Glink's housemate. So, yeah. It's we've been having a very good time here, and we've already met tons of really interesting people, really cool people here in Austin, and some people that are a lot of people who are fans of the show. So I'm glad to be on because they might be watching.
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan, yeah, of course. Joe Rogan was actually just in the house. He was on the new Glink and Kino podcast he just, he came on as a guest, so we got to be the Joe Rogan. No, I'm just kidding.
Already.
No, but the white pill is here, and I'm going to go back to something we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is the Smiling Friends, right? Because Zach Hadel, Michael Cusack, Chris O'Neill, those guys, they were able to make Smiling Friends for like a super, super small budget because they had been doing it themselves for so many years for the internet, and they, where they weren't getting paid to do it. I mean, they're getting paid in maybe like AdSense or whatever, through Oni Plays or something like that, but they weren't getting paid by like a studio to make this stuff. So they learned how to do it themselves and how to do it for cheap. And I think that what we can see and what I'm hoping to do, I'm hoping to do this with my own channel. I'm hoping to do this with my own channel and get other channels to do this as well. And I know that since I was talking to you about The Gamer from Mars, because I work with The Gamer from Mars as an editor and a writer, and we're trying to bring sort of where he's upping his own production to do like more traditional kind of documentaries and put them on YouTube. And like between him and me, I have all the film equipment that you would need to do that. So the overhead is incredibly low that we can make a full-on documentary for very little money because of previous investments and everything like that. But I'm hoping to do that even for my own channel. And I think that YouTubers who use YouTube to learn skills, to learn how to light better, to learn how to do props, to learn how to get permits or set scenes and things like that. With each YouTube video, if you're not like a YouTuber who's just sort of, sitting at his computer station and just talking to a camera. And sometimes I do that, that's fine. But like, you go out and you learn, and it can be a really great platform for learning how to make movies. And I'm confident that I can make a movie for I did make a ultra low budget movie that I shot on 16 millimeter for $75,000. I think that my next one I can do for even cheaper because of everything that I learned over the last 2 years. I'm sure that I can do it cheaper, and raising that kind of money is not that hard, even for a YouTuber like me. It's
well, where do your movies have a home, you think, in the future? On the internet, film festivals? Like, what's the trajectory here?
I think that so like for the kinds of movies that maybe like say a YouTuber goes into making a movie, and I think that some of the problems that YouTubers in the past have gone into making movies, for one of the problems is that they try to tie it into their YouTube channel way too much, right? Like I wouldn't want to make like this is the Kino Corner movie or something like that. Like that's stupid. That's
or
awful.
The Nostalgia Critic movie.
Oh well, those are great.
Oh,
okay, look, you're talking about a trilogy that beats Lord of the Rings. You're talking about Cassius, Suburban Nights, and To Boldly Flee. Have you guys seen To Boldly Flee? But seriously, like you have the Angry Video Game Nerd movie where it's essentially just a long episode. Yeah. You have the Smosh movie, which was made by the Bill and Ted guy, Alex Winter. The Fred movies, like they tie it into they tie it too much into their like brand that they've made on YouTube, right?
Thank God the early YouTubers have just been slaughtered like nothing. Like,
but
not that we have anything better nowadays.
I saw somebody in the chat bring this up, and this person isn't necessarily a YouTuber but a podcaster. But I can see this going forward with cinephiles, like cinephiles in this kind of space going forward, where we make these really low budget movies and we get them onto a place like Shudder, or even like I've even been thinking, and Glink and I have had ideas. We're writing a script, and our idea is to make a feature-length movie for, I don't know, 20,000, something like that we can shoot here in Austin with people that we know and everything like that. And we make a behind-the-scenes full-length documentary about it and release that we can get ads on, right, to kind of make some of the money back and sponsorships for or whatever. And then we release the movie itself straight to YouTube. Making these sort of low budget things. But somebody brought this up in the chat is Dasha Nekrasova's The Scary of 61st. if you want to check out my kind of defunct podcast, Kino Cast, I actually had a interview with Mark Rappaport, who was the producer of The Scariest 61st. But she's a podcaster. You know, she's on Red Scare. And,
love that's Love's favorite podcast.
And but she made this movie for less than $100,000 on 16 millimeter, and it was interesting. I'll say it was interesting. I don't know if you guys know the storyline of it. Is that these girls in New York move into this apartment and they find out that it was Jeffrey Epstein's apartment, and the ghost of Jeffrey Epstein is haunting them. And Dasha Nekrasova like shows up, and she's like this conspiracy theorist girl, and one of them gets possessed by like the spirit of Epstein. It's an interesting. It's interesting.
The engineer, the lolly master, right?
He might sue them, you know, when he comes back.
But what I'm saying is, like, I see, you know, we saw this with Smiling Friends, right? Newgrounds, and coming out and making this low budget stuff, this thing that kind of hits the cultural zeitgeist. And the thing is that if you're a podcaster or a YouTuber, if you're making stuff all the time, and you're not in LA sort of just living within that studio system, which is a bubble, they, you know, when you're like us, you have to kind of have an ear to the ground. I think that the lower budget stuff or whatever that is possible. I'm not saying that it's always going to be good, because it's not, but I think it's possible that some of these works might end up hitting that cultural zeitgeist and being more culturally appropriate and affecting more people, even if they're not as polished as a studio film.
But how would you compete with the low attention span that may be inflicting more and more generations to come?
TikTok, man.
I'm convinced TikTok is a Chinese weapon that's been designed to, and you know how the Chinese TikTok works, as far as I understand.
Oh, yeah.
In China, they make various shows in TikTok about self-improvement, about look at this, you know, wonderful student who was able to come up with some new device or whatever. You know, and I say a lot of bad things about China, but that seems to be actually something that may actually work. Yeah,
it's very smart.
Well, the fact they censor their cinema, that's another big sticking point. But then it's like
No, I wouldn't go to that direction. All that I'd say though is I'm not a fan of the.
They do care about the moral hygiene of their population.
Yeah, I don't know if it's about them caring about the population as much as achieving a certain standard. But okay, Catherine.
Well, also, one thing that they do is create games that get people addicted, and for some
reason, Genshin Impact.
Oh yeah,
they're only released in the U.S. or North America.
There we go. Yeah. While the students in China
did a documentary about that, the Chinese microtransaction games, or was it?
Ordinary Things.
I was involved in one of these games, and I
good
feel
friend of the channel
about it.
Oh man. But
you guys should get Ordinary Things on here. It'd be interesting.
Say that again?
Ordinary Things.
I think he did a documentary on the Chinese microtransaction games and how it's tied into their social credit system in a weird draconian way.
Oh, man, I'm going to check this out.
China also limits how much people can play video games in China. So there's like hours.
Based. That's good.
Yeah, so
it's funny that they do that for their population, but our population
but that's the psyop though. It's the same with the censorship, because they support they especially
support the woke
here in Canada.
Stuff in the States.
Yeah, they'll support progressive or whatever institutions and causes, but yet at the same time they will censor any mention of quote unquote alternative lifestyles in China in the movies.
Yeah. They had this stuff first, and then they decided to limit it, right? Like they had Hollywood movies, they had all this stuff, and then they decided, okay, we don't want it. So I think that in some ways that might backfire on them. I mean, I don't want to get too far into a different topic, but I just feel like when you take something away after building a culture of people who like it, you're going to build resentment. So like,
Well,
I
also,
think that's
if we're
kind
talking
of-
about in waves, though, I think Slush has a good point here. And Philip Daniel said earlier, it's revenge for the Opium Wars.
Oh, that
what China,
could be.
what
Yeah,
China's
that
doing.
could be.
No, but in all seriousness, though,
Anime too.
exactly. Yeah, well, yes. But as far as what may happen, I still think, I'm curious what you guys think, and I think this is going to be more towards the wrapping up. Everybody sneed your super chats, add a like right now, because that
Wait, how
helps
much
the
time do
algorithm,
we
and
got?
subscribe.
Feed and feed.
Yes, need and feed those
Sneed
super
and feed.
chats. Yes, but
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, we got a bit of time here.
'Cause I
But,
wanted to talk about Salo a little bit.
oh, well, we will get to Salo.
I'll get back to it. I'll be back in a second.
Okay,
Yeah.
go be back in a second. And while you're not here, I just want to say that if you want a high quality magnet of some work, a film that you really admire, if you want Slush's head as a magnet, what you have to do is become a patron and break the rules, okay? Become a patron for $5. You're going to get MP3s of the episodes after they come out. When you become a $20 patron, you are going to get the magnets, the wooden magnets, but they're going to be random. You don't really get to choose what it is, but believe me, it's going to be a great investment. In the future, you're going to say, I got this magnet while BTR was still in its infancy, and now that BTR has grown to the point of inviting Joe Rogan over every week, and having a bison dinner on the air, and Joe Rogan is going to be like an old man, but he's still going to be powered up because of all the transhumanist stuff that he's implanted inside of himself. It's going to be a good time for all.
It's all the elk meat and the nootropics. That's
well,
what
it's a
keeps
mix
him
of
alive.
it's a mix of technology and common sense. But anyway, when you become a $20 patron, you're going to get those beautiful magnets. When you become a $30 patron, you are going to get a beautiful print from Giovanni Pennacchietti. I've got 2 addresses I got to send you, by the way, that you got to send to the people. And when you become a $50 patron, you're going to get all of that. Plus, instead of the random magnets, you get to choose, what magnet do I want to have? Well, it's going to be up to you within limits, of course. We can't have, some crazy, intense spider, shooting a web, and each piece of wood is like a separate part of the web. We're not going to do that crazy stuff. So just keep it simple, but it's still going to look good. Whatever you want is going to be done.
Feed and seed.
And feed and seed, exactly. Feed and seed those super chats,
Yeah.
and you cannot go wrong with the support through the super chats or the support through the Patreon. So Kino Corner, I used your opportunity of not being on the air to plug the Patreon, but you have a Patreon too. I want to be fair, right?
I do have a Patreon, yeah.
So go and support Kino Corner's Patreon, which I'm going to put on the screen right now, as well as supporting the Break the Rules Patreon. In fact, support both, and you are going to, you're going to go far in life, kid, if you support both Patreons. Anyway, getting
And
back.
Is that an
GoFundMe
Offspring
is very
reference?
important.
Wait, what?
You're gonna go
Catherine?
far, kid? Oh, sorry.
I said,
yeah.
my GoFundMe, page, please.
Yes.
It's to send a dog to ski school.
Oh, I have a comment over here on Twitter from Carrot Rope who says, totally ask the Kino Corner about post-irony in movies and if there's a cure. I can't stand another Deadpool-type movie coming out.
The cure is to not pay to see these movies and to not talk about them. Look, if you think that a movie, like, okay, so I go on Mumkeys is a Kino podcast. I know Mumkey Jones was in the chat a little earlier, and I'll review the movies and stuff like that. And sometimes I'll talk about them. But I'm not going to make a full on video about why, I don't like these cape shit movies or why, I hate the Marvel stuff, because the more attention you give them, that's you're feeding into them, right?
Gore, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the only way to stop it is that if you see a movie like Free Guy or any movie with Ryan Reynolds, really, just pretend like it doesn't exist.
That's why
I cried during that movie.
You want to know if you guys want to know something interesting? Look up Deadpool 2 motorcycle accident and how that happened. Right? that's something.
Was it Alec Baldwin?
Well, it's another Alec Baldwin type situation that no one really talks about anymore, where they had a stunt woman who wasn't ready for the stunt, and they had her do a motorcycle stunt, and she died during Deadpool 2. They were really pushing her when she was definitely not ready definitely not able to do that stunt. Look into it. Just a
the
little
most
bit.
extreme
Don't
one
support
I'd
it.
say. The most extreme one I'd say
Twilight
is the
one?
no, not Twilight. It's
Zone?
the no, it's the Twilight. Twilight Zone
Oh,
movie.
the Twilight
the
Zone movie.
helicopter.
Yeah, the helicopter.
Oh my
sequence.
gosh.
Or
That's
Brandon
such a-
Lee, the Crow one. That was, yeah.
No, that Twilight Zone with the John Landis and that whole fallout. My gosh, that is one of the most depressing things that has, I think, ever happened in cinema. I mean, the fact that the parents weren't even notified, their kids' heads were cut. Well, one of the kids' heads was cut off. The other was crushed by a helicopter.
Oh my
And
gosh.
then John Landis seemingly wasn't really even that affected. If you look at his his testimony and stuff, he was talking more about how this event affected his career and not talking about how 3 people died under his watch and because of him.
Was he also coked out at the time or no? Was that
He
Might have
it's
been.
Hollywood in the 80s, man.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say yes or no, but it's Hollywood in the 80s.
I mean, with somebody like him, it just makes me very, very torn. Because on one hand, John Landis is like one of those one in a million types directors. Like the Blues Brothers, for example. Like very legendary, very legendary status there. But at the same time, to have that kind of reaction, again, like to the comment about whether they're going to be assholes or not. I mean, that goes beyond being an asshole. But
I'll say one thing. Max Landis is his son.
I worked with Max, actually.
Really?
I'm very familiar.
Max Landis is his son, and so it doesn't. John Landis being that way doesn't surprise me.
I have not seen somebody hate it quite as much as.
I
actually didn't hate him as much as other people did, but
yeah.
Wait, I'm out of the loop here, and other
do,
people may be out of the loop
yeah.
too. Who is Max Landis other than being his son? What does he do? And
He's a
what
screenwriter.
Why the reaction to him
did
like
a
that?
documentary on him recently.
Turkey Tom covered it.
Oh.
Max Landis, he's actually subscribed to Oki's Weird Stories. I think one of our friends, but he's just a weird guy. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, it is to go into the Max Landis lore. That's a deep rabbit hole. That's too deep for this podcast. But one of my favorite anecdotes, I guess, that I heard about Max Landis. And again, I don't know him. Could be true. Could be
Here's
rumor.
a photo of Max Landis. I've never seen him before. Now I've seen him.
Yeah,
He was on Red Letter Media, but they took down the videos that he was on with them. After it was some like rape scandal or something like that. He got Me Too'd. But one of the things that I did hear, again, could be true, maybe, is that after he would sleep with women, he would have a list of all the women he slept with denoting whether or not the sex was like good, bad, terrible, whatever. And he would show this to the women he had just slept with.
That
like
in itself is very effeminate behavior. That I can't buy by that.
And give them a score. Like it was like a
Oh, looks 10 out of 10. Lay 2 out of 10. Yeah.
It's just like on Twitter. It's like there's like those guys in their profile pictures. They're the like ugliest looking dudes, and they'll reply to women with like mid or whatever. It's the same energy.
What I wouldn't do, yeah, they'll reply to like OnlyFans thoughts, and oh man, brutal.
Well, there's a lot of self-confidence there, I guess, or maybe the opposite. I don't know.
no confidence.
No, I think, that's something else. What were we gonna talk about?
Okay, so the last thing that I want to talk about, I know that Salo has to be brought up, but before getting to Salo, the last thing that I wanted to address is when it comes back to the Star Wars thing. I understand that the prequels were not that favored. I understand, Lev was psyoped by, the internet memes right now of talking about the prequels being good. But there was still, despite whatever psyopting people think was done to people who were like the OG Star Wars fans back from the 70s onwards, there is still something very, very perturbing about the new Star Wars, and I can't exactly put my finger on it, but it seems way more forced, and it seems, I don't know, there's something very
it's
strange.
Lev, it's
Yes.
nostalgia. That's what it is. It's shameless.
It's weaponized nostalgia.
The postmodern Star Wars. It's like the new Matrix, all right? Like
Okay.
Sam Chris, I always bring it up, has a great article where the very, very small time frame, the 1990s, late 90s, early 2000s, where Hollywood was willing to critique itself. You had films like The Matrix, of course, really not. I mean, I agree with Bozier. It's the film that The Matrix would make. You had films like Existence in particular. You had
Existence is much better than The Matrix, by the way.
Much better, exactly, and much more logical in terms of the way things are going.
Yeah.
But you have this sort of concretization of the sort of theories of, Neoplatonic simulation and so forth. But you also have a weird period in Hollywood history where Hollywood was willing to, like, the culture industry itself was sort of willing to critique itself. It was sort of like this weird...
You know what the best, and not to cut you off, but you know what the best movie for this case is The Truman Show.
Yeah, The Truman Show? Yeah, You mentioned The Truman Show, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have this sort of critique of the fabulation machine. But nowadays, you have this... Now, what did Sam Chris say? It's no longer question everything. Now it's like listen and believe, right? Like that's...
Mm-hmm.
But the new Matrix movie is the perfect example of this because you have in it this sort of ironic postmodern, like, sort of dig at its own self where it's like they're talking about it. They're like literally dialoguing.
Yeah.
Like, is it about the patriarchy? Is it about the simulation? Is it about Jean Baudrillard? It's like, no, it's like this is such... And the new Matrix is indicative of the capacity by which Hollywood can create, that same culture industry can create a mythology onto itself, and then not critique itself, but rather market its own sort of imago to the audience by saying, you remember this? Remember that? Now we're going to have a woke version of that, but it's going to be good because it's still like the sound that
like Lord of the Rings
or whatever. It's like,
I mean, that's the one thing we didn't talk about. I remember when we wanted to do this stream earlier on, you said that you were making a video on that. Is that video still in production? Did I miss it? Is it what's the situation there? And could we maybe get a bit of a spoiler, not a spoiler, but a bit of an intro to that video?
This is why Ready Player One was a great film, because it's giving away the kayfabe of the culture industry.
I would agree with that about Ready Player One, but it's not a great film.
No, it's a terrible film. It's disgusting. But the fact that it's so disgusting and lurid, and it says that it jerks you off at the very end by saying that the real solution is just cool down a little bit, but you could still play in your little nostalgic big budget Hollywood video game fantasy. But it's like there's something about it where it's the ultimate cenotaph to the culture industry itself. But that being said,
back to the Lord of the Rings question.
Yeah,
what do you think exactly could be said that has not already been said? Are we missing anything when it comes to this, or have we already pretty much cracked this nut of what's going on with the new Lord of the Rings reboot right now, or whatever it is?
Are you talking to Gio or to me?
I'm talking to you, Kino.
Oh.
Yes.
No, okay. No, so when I said that I'm making a video, it wasn't about the Lord of the Rings show in particular. It was more like a wide-ranging thing to talk not just about the Lord of the Rings show, although that's a part of it, but also Matrix, Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is the same thing, where it's just pointing to symbols of movies that were better, and it becomes a pale like simulation essentially of the movie that you can already watch yourself. And that's the crazy thing to me, right? Is that I can go back and I can watch the original Ghostbusters. Why am I going to watch Ghostbusters Afterlife that's going to have all these symbols like the Marshmallow Man in the context of the film? Makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense within the context of Ghostbusters Afterlife. But they put all these like things to give you a dopamine rush because you're like, oh, I recognize that. And that's why actually when I was watching Ghostbusters Afterlife, I went to a preview screening where all the fans were there, right? And there's a shot where they have all the Ghostbusters in the same frame at one time. It's this hero shot, right? Sorry for spoiling it. The movie's not that great, but And I, during these kinds of movies when I'm at the theater, I like to play a game where I like to start clapping during moments and see if I can get the entire theater clapping.
Oh, that's terrible.
So during Spider-Man No Way Home, I was able to successfully do it 3 or 4 times. During Ghostbusters, I started clapping at this, and it wasn't like a normal clap. It was the Charles Foster Kane clap, after he watches his wife perform pretty badly on stage, where he's just going like. I was doing that clap. I got people standing up. I got them hooting and hollering. They're like, "Yeah, the Ghostbusters are back!"
What? Can you imagine, like, the type of people that's like the Ghostbusters?
Well, it kind of reminds me of this poster that I just put on the screen over here. It's like the early '90s nostalgia. Oh, that's right. You guys can't see it over here, but you guys could see it in the chat. It's like one of these. It's like one of these old paintings of. In fact, let me just put this into my camera. That way, you guys. Can, I was not aware that the chat was not being seen all this time by the actual people in StreamYard. I forgot about that, man.
I've been checking in. In on the chat.
Yeah, yes.
No.
But anyway, the point that I'm getting to here is that there is this 90s nostalgia with Pokemon and Sega and Nintendo. It's all kind of smashed together in this, congealing form. Yeah, and it does not feel authentic at all.
Yeah, I have strong 90s nostalgia as well, but still, it's like, ugh.
No, it's there's something kind of
typical millennial behavior, right?
Yeah.
Well, the question about nostalgia though is, right, I feel nostalgia, but I never feel nostalgia for properties. I feel nostalgia for
a mood,
moods, moments in my life. Like I remember going to this bakery when I was like 3 years old with my mom, and I was getting the like a petit four, and like it was always like during these good days and stuff like that. I remember the how warm it was. I remember the smell of the magnolia trees in bloom. Things like this. I get nostalgic for that. I get nostalgic for when I was a kid. I'd ride bikes with my friends all over town. The nostalgia that you see in movies isn't a nostalgia for these personal experiences, these personal moments that actually mean something to you. It's nostalgia for brands. It's nostalgia for something that you can buy. And it's really cynical because what they're doing is they're just taking something that they know, and it's like the 30-year cycle, right? So we're entering the 2020s, so it's going to be the 90s, because now that us 90s kids have grown up, we now have spending money, we can now buy things, and we're going to feel nostalgic for these personal moments, but that's going to be repurposed by these studios and corporations to get us to essentially buy repackaged products, whether or not, like, remember how that purple ketchup came back for a while?
It did?
Yes.
That shit was disgusting back in the day.
Surge came back in it, and
Surge came back.
Yeah, and so these things will come back, and and it's so cynical to me because it's just like, hey, remember, because what they're essentially saying to you is, remember when you were happy, this was a brand that you liked, and so now you're going to associate this particular brand with happiness. Because we know
jokes on them. I was never happy.
Because now your life sucks, but maybe you can get a little.
Now we live in hell clown world. Yeah.
Yeah. Now your life sucks, but you can at least pretend that you're living in the past if you buy our product that we're just repackaging to you, and it's and they know that they can sell a bunch of this shit.
I am nostalgic for times when I didn't even exist. Like, I'm nostalgic. Yeah,
for
like
a place you never knew.
Yeah, for like Japanese city pop. I mean, that's another interesting development that's going on with the internet. People are being exposed to all these different musical genres as well as movie genres. But specifically with Japanese city pop, it's this time in Japan where economically they were doing really, really well. And there was all of this, very energetic music that denoted that kind of time, as well as all these pretty girls who were dressed up in these frilly 80s outfits. Yeah. People miss that because they recognize that. I'll give you this example. There was this wonderful anime which I recommend everybody check out. It's called, I believe, Megazone 33. I don't know, people in the chat, let me know if you've heard of that one. But this is going to be a minor spoiler, not a full thing, but the whole place, the whole series takes place in this satellite of Earthlings that had to flee a dying planet Earth, and while the planet Earth was being rebuilt, their colony had to mimic a certain time in the cycle of the Earth, so it chose to mimic the 1980s in Japan, where all the people who were living there said, like, this is like the most peaceful time that human beings have ever existed in, so that's why the algorithm, like the AI, chose to have them live in that place. And I think that there is something to that, why people are drawn to that kind of energy. But I do wish that there was a way that we can transmute that desire and actually create something new instead of just relying on the old.
But that's the thing, Lev. Like, I know people that write for fucking zero books have beaten this to death, but like, and they have done it for the wrong reasons. But you have this sort of like ontological thing where, especially with millennials, because we are like the crossover generation from when time became virtual and simulation took over everything from culture and politics to ordinary life, to like this mythical past where unless you lived in, Eastern Europe or the Congo or wherever, the 90s were like, this mythical place of cultural creation and authenticity because, the wall fell and the end of history was about to come. But right before the end of history, right before the towers fell, things were kind of perfect, right? Like that is what I think becomes a mental prison unto itself, because now we're essentially seeding the imagination of most people onto the past, but onto the recent past. It can't be like the actual past, because that's that's like has a bunch of isms.
Nothing foundational. I was just gonna say it's nothing foundational. It's pointing to just, the 90s culture is still very similar to culture now. Like if you look at fashion and everything, it really hasn't changed a whole lot. It's not like we're looking towards a kind of creation myth of our nation or of our ideology in a sense.
Right.
In fact, we've been tearing it down and kind of making us live. I don't know. I remember the 90s as being definitely a freer time, but but people do have this mythical idea of the 90s, and they kind of forget, like, for one, they forget Serbia. They forget all the stuff that was happening in Yugoslavia or former Yugoslavia. They forget Waco. They forget
the 90s. They're thinking of like the American 90s, living in
the American 90s. Yeah, but we were involved in that. There was still like a lot of
international affairs. Thinking about like domestic life.
No, but domestic too. Waco.
American life peaked, right?
Well,
but Waco, it was one instance. Well, there's also Ruby Ridge, but still,
Ruby Ridge and Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah, sure, but still, in terms of like all the things that are around us today, as far as like the idea of the security state, TSA, all these things that we have had to deal with since that fateful day, it does seem like there is this before and after, and
there's definitely before and after.
There is.
We're living in another before and after now, right? Like we're living in post-COVID.
Yeah, I'm just saying that because I just want to like temper the 90s with like there was plenty of stuff that was not great. And actually, I just watched Richard Linklater's new movie called Apollo 10.5: A Space Age Childhood, which is done in the rotoscope animation, like how he did A Scanner Darkly and Waking Life. And it's kind of a
Waking
video.
Life, nobody mentions that, but that is like, I
just showed Glink Waking Life. I'm Linklater pilling him.
Just an aside before you go on, the Alex Jones in Waking Life was much more authentic to Alex Jones than in Scanner Darkly.
Oh yeah. In A Scanner Darkly, he's playing a bit of a parody of himself, but but Linklater's new movie is coming to Netflix on April 1st. I'm going to try to get like a review discussion about it out before then, but it's about what it was like to live as a kid in the 60s. And it's more of like a video essay just about life, like basically what his life in Texas was like at that time in the late 60s, watching this space age and watching, TV, playing with friends, kind of the differences and culture. And what he does is he shows like all this kind of really nostalgic stuff, and then he'll intercut it with like showing archival footage of Vietnam or of riots, of all these terrible things that are happening, because also the late 60s, you had a lot more political violence that was starting to come in the 70s were terrible for that. Of course, you
Yeah.
see that in film too at the time. Straw Dogs, he's trying to escape the violence in the States. A lot of people forget that aspect of it, is that he's an intellectual trying to escape all this like increasing violence, and he goes to England only to find the violence there.
Yeah.
But Taxi Driver and everything like that.
It would have been funny if he would have gone to the USSR thinking that would be better.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing they'd never showed, by the way, in the propaganda pieces back in the USSR were American roads. They showed homelessness in America. That's what they wanted people to think America was like. They never showed the roads because they knew they couldn't compete. Anyway.
Yeah. Didn't they also teach that the moon landing was faked?
Well, I mean, okay.
I think so. That's what I heard.
No. I think the moon landing was real, but it wasn't the moon landing that we saw. I think that there's like all kinds of bases on the moon and Operation High Jump
David Icke
and all
is
that
right.
stuff.
It's hollow.
Well, maybe.
Look,
I
saw this
hollow.
one movie. I saw this one movie that was pretty convincing called Iron Sky.
Oh yeah.
That convinced me.
I'm not surprised if you have like Admiral Byrd, who went to a newspaper there in South America and wrote about the threat of the Third Reich in Antarctica. Again, I have to actually have the newspaper in front of me. I have to go to the archives to see if this is real. If this is real, then that's kind of a big deal as far as like all the UFOs that we see today and the things that we attribute to those UFOs being able to go underwater. That stuff was talked about back in the 50s. Anyway, I don't want to show my...
I think we live in space right now, actually.
Yeah.
What happened was we were all copied. Our brains were uploaded onto a cloud, then loaded onto a computer that had like a spaceship. Then we were flown to a different planet, reorganized. Our bodies were grown in biolabs. And then we're reconnected with our minds. So we think we're the same, but we're actually the clones of the people on Earth.
I 100%
You know what's
agree.
funny is that Francis E. Deck actually believed that. That was, yeah. So they should make a movie on him.
Gio's got to get Catherine Francis E. Deck peeled. Anyway, before we end
go to
this...
Outsider Theory podcast with Jeffrey Schellenberger. Did a whole 1 hour-long episode on Francis E. Deck with him. So, and he's an actual academic.
Nice.
So
well, let us hit the deck with some super chats. So as I'm saying, the super chats, once again, everybody who is watching this, need those super chats to break the rules right now. Add a like. The like helps the algorithm. And once again, listen, the people who are watching this, who are fans of Kino Corner, who are fans of Slush, subscribe, and keep subscribing. There's going to be a lot of great guests coming your way soon. So anyway, let us go into the super chats. We got Haley May, $5. Would Kino Corner like a movie made entirely in a constructed language like Anglish?
Or Simlish. I mean,
he's gonna make it. Yes.
I mean, sure. Like, whether or not the people are speaking a constructed language or whatever, it's like I don't really care as long as the movie's good. So if it fits the world that they're building or something like that, like you have plenty of constructed languages in films and in television and in film and in novels and everything like that. It's not like it's a new thing, but it's kind of like, okay, what if I watch a Lord of the Rings movie that's all in Elven or the Elven language? It's like, that would be cool. I don't necessarily like, I can see the problems with it. It's a constructed language, so your actors aren't going to be fluent in it, and it might make their acting a bit more wooden. But if you're able to get past that, if they're able to give good performances while speaking in a language that they don't know, then all power to it.
It reminds me of an idea that I had for an animation. No, I did that animation, actually, the Pokemon animation, where the humans became the Pokemon. So they started speaking like their own name or their own title or whatever, and it got reversed. Anyway, we got over here the ABC. Before that, Croin Kicks, $20. Woo! That's what I'm talking about, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Croin Kicks, our resident Zoomer, who is a big fan of movies, so he was the one who was talking about how I'm wrong in assuming that Zoomers do not know movies. Zoomers do know movies. So thank you,
Well, that
Kroinkicks.
Zoomer knows movies.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, too. So Kroinkick says, appreciate BTR. My favorite movie is Sneed for BTR. All right, there we are. Next, ABC 123456399, $5. Anime music. Just look at the physique of your average Berserk enjoyer versus your average cape shit consumer coomer.
He meant movies. He said animes are greater than movies.
Oh, there we go. Anime is greater than. Do you agree?
Look,
I don't know about that, but Berserk
I don't know
is
about
definitely
that.
better than anything. Yeah.
have you seen YouTube anime reviewers? I'm just saying.
Oh no, that's.
What are you saying here? Spell it out for the audience.
I'll let
I'm
people
asking
come to
for a
their own
friend.
conclusions. I'm not gonna. I'll let people come to their own conclusions.
That's a cold little stab. That's a knife that's been sitting in the fridge for half a day. All right, so next we have ABC. Another ABC. Thank you. Okay, see, this is all censored, so I don't even know. Movies, something censored. I'm such a.
No. He was just correcting the last one.
Oh, there we go.
I saw that earlier. Yeah.
Perfect.
He called himself a retard. Yeah.
Yes. Croin kicks $5. What if Linklater said about l'argent is what Linklater said about l'argent is BS? That was an excuse to say it twice because I like speaking French. Lancelot du Lac is his most violent. Bresson is the greatest.
Well, Lancelot du Lac is his most violent. Yes. But I think that the violence in the third act of L'Argent is it's a bit more harder hitting because it's a lot more cold blooded than in Lancelot du Lac. Like Lancelot du Lac is way bloodier, but it's medieval knights, and it's like maybe it's more expected because of the subject matter. Whereas in L'Argent, this character becomes a mass murderer with an axe, and you don't see as much. It's not quite as bloody. But I think that for Linklater, I think he's you don't have to agree with his assessment, but I can understand his assessment because that violence to me is more shocking, and it's probably more shocking to Linklater. That may be why he said that. But yeah, Lancelot du Lac definitely has way more blood and gore in it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's more impactful. I still love Lancelot du Lac. I don't think there's a single Bresson film that I dislike, except I think that Angels of Sin, Les Anges du Péché, I think that one is kind of mid. But then again, that was like a studio film that he did when he was just getting started. So.
So next we have ABC again, who for $2 recommends a certain greatest story that has, for what he's talking about, has ever been told. And there we go. There's that. So next,
I've seen part of it. I can tell you, it's not good. Mumke sent it to me 2 months ago and was like, "Hey, you should watch this." I got an hour into it, and it's terrible voiceover mixed with sometimes montages of a certain German leader looking very happy
Austrian
and playing
painter.
around.
yes,
And
Catherine, I just want you to know what exactly is being talked about here.
Story never told.
So
it was
wait,
a meme on 4chan, like
Like 2016.
yeah, and then it straight up like steals the music from Band of Brothers, and I found that so ironically funny. And so Bumke asked me if I liked it. I was like, well, the film, like it feels like a YouTube video, like one of those like kind of schizo YouTube videos it's made. But I like the music to Band of Brothers. So when they played that music, I'm like, well, I like that music, you know. I guess that's the one thing. But
I'm glad
I wouldn't
that's
recommend
the one thing.
it. I wouldn't recommend it.
Everyone go and watch it right after stream, all 5 hours.
Band of Brothers, more like Band of Brothers, more like Boond of Brothers. All right.
Oh, man.
Anyway, Massive McGee, £2. Zoomers know movies, geriatrics. Okay. Next.
I'm fighting for the Zoomers. I'm your.
Well, you got
I'm
the
your
Zoomer
champion.
perm going on. You got.
It's not even a perm. My hair is just like this. Naturally.
There we go. Haley May, Anglish is better than Elvish.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
I don't know what does English sound like.
Hello, governor. Hello, gov. All right, next.
All right, then.
Listen, we got to talk about Salo. I forgot about Salo. Let's talk about Salo and let's end this thing, okay? Salo, go.
Salo's a good movie. You got to watch it. No.
Watch it with your family. No, go ahead.
So the thing that brought me to Salo is the fact that it was one of these movies where it's one of those movies, right, where people say like, dude, this movie's really fucked up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's really fucked up. Like, you don't want to watch it. And
it's like Philosophy of a Knife. Yeah.
Yeah. And, people are saying this to me. And you go on YouTube and you saw all these videos and it's all about just like, Salo's so gross. And every time I see that about a movie, I think to myself, it can't be that bad. Like people
like
are
a
like
Serbian
Cannibal
film.
Holocaust. Yeah.
I'm like, it can't be that bad. Everyone's acting like it's some boogeyman film. And like, if you know that it's all fake, then why do you think it's going to be something that's going to just get into your nightmares for the rest of your life or something like that?
Is it more bloodier than Martyrs? Have you seen Martyrs?
No, it's different.
Martyrs is
it's
bloodier.
Way different. Martyrs is way bloodier.
Martyrs is way different. I was actually more shocked by Martyrs than I was by Salo.
Yeah.
But so everyone's talking about this with Salo, and then I watched Salo, and I think that was an incredible movie. For one, it's beautiful. I mean, every Pasolini film is beautiful, and if you want to get into Pasolini, maybe a better introduction to. Well, he has two different kinds of movies. He has like his the Trilogy of Life comedy, which is sort of like Animal House, but in like medieval Italy. I mean, those are great, but I say also watch Teorema or Theorem, and that's maybe more in line with what Salo is. And and in my head, I have like two different ideas I have an idea of like two different kinds of movies. There's like narrative films that are meant to tell stories. It's kind of like most films that you watch. And then there's poetic movies that feel kind of like poetry on screen. So I put Salo in there, put most of Terrence Malick in there, Bresson in there. And Salo is incredibly poetic. And for one, I mean, I was blown away by the cinematography and the set design initially. And just, it has this coldness to it. It feels theatrical, but, it opens up with a bibliography. And that was something that kind of surprised me the first time I watched it, where it wants you to read Roland Barthes and Simone de Beauvoir. And he takes from a whole lot of different philosophers in this. And something that's interesting that I didn't bring up in the video is that the fascist maid or their servant is named Evola. It's a really just sort of passing thing.
Oh, by the way, speaking of Evola, I completely forgot the super chat over here. My apologies. Okay, so Nick Larson, 199. Gio, please do another dramatic biblical reading. And where could people find your dramatical readings?
Janet Productions, youtube.com, my YouTube channel.
There we go. And final super chat we have over here. ABC says, I meant the Jesus movie. I don't know what that was in reference to.
Which Jesus movie?
Last Temptation of Christ is my favorite. I don't know about Kino Corner or Slush.
Oh, God.
That was the best one. I don't know.
That was the worst one. Anyways, it's totally heretical.
Speaking of those Brooklyn accents, the lion with the Brooklyn accents, great.
No, but you mentioned the stage piece. I think the fact that it's set, I mean, at the later stages of fascist Italy, it gives it almost an apocalyptic feel in the sense of things coming to an end. But what I was shocked about your review of it was that you come up with I think, in my opinion, the best interpretation of what Pasolini meant by Salo. Because at the time, critics, they loved it because they took it to be like, what would you say? Like just ordinary shitlib critique of like fascism being this emotive upsurge of the unconscious that is chaotic and has an Oedipal character, and the sort of sexual terrorism that goes into Salo is like indicative of the fascist mind. Yeah, the blah, 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 that like basically, that's like the lib critique of it. Right. But what you pointed to is sort of what I would say in terms of the actual content, which is from Desaad himself, is a greater critique of the sort of prevailing global neoliberal order of things in terms of the rendering of the human subject down to its basest parts, down
we become
into
consumable products.
Exactly, and
it's a fascism. It's a fascism of this, if you want to call it late stage capitalism or post capitalism or consumerism or whatever it is.
Right.
But it is a fascism. I mean, and we see that, we're being made to eat shit every single day. Where we're
the seed oils,
the seed oils, the Marvel movies, the Disney, everything like that. We're being made to do that.
The logic of mass production, that is the sort of the key of it, because I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a fascism, because fascism has its own sort of unique genealogy, but I would say that it's certainly an anarcho-tyranny. I know that's a meme term in the online, right? But like the one line, us fascists are the true anarchists, you pointed to that in the sense of total power being an anarchic force. And this is, again, what people would say, this is what Deleuze even said about the film and about fascism in general, that it can also become a rhizomatic thing. It can also have a sort of channeling of desire in a certain chaotic fashion. But
yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing though, because there's a lot of words that are being said over here, and while I'm not going to disagree that a lot of these elements that are creeping into our lives, as far as the seed oils, the sneed oils, all this stuff is something that we have to, be very vigilant on, and I think something a lot of people are not vigilant on, who are not paying as much attention. At the same time, I really think that when people become terminally online, their sense of judgment of, let's say, having an order of operations, looking at, for example, what exactly is going on in your life versus the life of somebody who is in a situation where they could be arrested for saying the wrong thing, where, like anything that reeks of the kind of solution that unfortunately I find to be the answer to a lot of these existential questions from people that at the same time oppose them for the
but that's too much of an army point. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at the picture of the human subject that is portrayed by Pasolini, and it comes specifically from that Enlightenment approach of instrumental reason, like this. So Horkheimer and Adorno in the Dialect of Enlightenment, they talk about how Desaad is the perfect Enlightenment subject from Kant onwards, because now you have this categorization of all life into one specific, very broken down unit, right? So that one scene you were talking about where they're expecting the men and the women, and there's no faces, there's just the sort of the whole, right? They're looking for the perfect ass, right?
Yeah.
The human subject is rendered down into its bodily function, into a whole to manipulate. That is Desaad. That is the sort of sadomasochism that you're looking at. But notice how they're linking it directly to the sort of modern Western project of now you are a faceless cog, you are you're reprogrammable, you are an individual unit. But also in Salo, which I think the critics would link it to fascism, but I would say what you were saying is that there's something deeper going on than just like, political gripes. Is that there's certain moments where there is a denial of the procreative act within the behavior of the aristocrats, within, there was this one scene where they were stopping they did the ritual wedding. They were stopping them from actually having sex to do an oral act. And of course, there's a lot of sodomy, and they talk about how sodomy itself is like this little death, right? There's a denial of that sort of vitality of life in this very chaotic power structure.
The thing is that they even outside of homosexual sex within the film, even if they're having sex with a woman, they're still committing sodomy, because they want to have the act while denying the life-giving aspects that act can produce.
Exactly.
And so it is a sort of a constant. It is kind of a constant death, and it's not to say this in a homophobic way, because obviously Pasolini himself was gay.
He was.
But he was definitely and so people thought that it was anti-gay or something like that. I've also seen those criticisms, and it's like, well, I don't know, maybe he was self-hating. Who knows? Like,
I think he
it's
saw
possible.
something deeper in how there is a sort of sexual humiliation that comes with
Yeah.
this excess of power that comes from the unconscious. That is sort of like, for example, Horkheimer and Adorno, they talk about how in Juliet, in Justine, the virtuous sister is a martyr to the moral law. Juliet, however, draws the conclusion of the bourgeoisie sought to avoid. She demoralizes Catholicism as the latest mythology and what is civilization as a whole. The energies previously focused on the sacramental are now devoided, perversed to sacrilege. This inversion is extended to community in general, and all of Juliet does not proceed fanatically as Catholicism has done with Incas, but merely attend to the business of sacrilege and its effect. Then the page over, to be free of the stab of the conscious is an essential to formalistic reason. To be free of love and hate. Remorse posits the past, which, contrary to popular ideology, has always meant nothing to the bourgeoisie, as something which exists, is a relapse to pervert which the bourgeoisie practices. So they're saying that every human sentiment has to be broken down in this sort of total enlightenment system of instrumental reason.
Yeah.
And the human individual itself has to be broken down into something that doesn't have a history or doesn't have an affect to it.
And that lack of history plays right into Salo too,
Exactly,
because I know
yeah.
that you talk about the apocalyptic thing, but
Right.
and we know, looking back on it, because it takes place in Italy in 1944, 1945.
Yeah.
We know that Italy loses, that 1945 it all comes to an end, but the film doesn't give us that picture. The film gives us the picture, and this is how Pasolini saw it. Is that basically how Pasolini saw it? Is that fascism coming to an end in Italy was not the end of the bourgeois control of power. It wasn't the end of any of this. It was a fashion that they went through, but they're still doing the same thing. And so it ends with the two with them murdering and torturing, all the adolescents, and then the two younger sort of proteges, because they have a couple, like 4 proteges that are obviously meant to take the place of the libertines later. The two proteges dancing with each other while everyone is getting murdered outside, and it gives you this idea with this music that's playing, gives you this idea that it's this eternal thing, that they're in this eternal cycle, and that it's going to keep on going on, that there's going to be more victims, that they're going to grow up to take the libertines' place. Something that I think that the film really improved upon on the book. I had some people tell me, "Oh, the book is so much better." Try reading the book. Try reading the book.
Yeah.
It's unreadable. There's
a strange thing here, and I confess I have not seen this movie, but from the description that you're saying right now, this cyclical approach to saying that ultimately there's no good decision that you could possibly make, that everything is going to wind up being the same shit.
I don't think that's what he's saying, though.
Okay, if that's not what he's saying, then
No, I don't think that's what he's saying. He's painting a picture about power and about the cycles of power. But he does give hope in the sense of he does give hope within the film, like the man who puts up his fist he gets shot down, but it shows that even among their own ranks, there is resistance against them. And what he also does, and what I was going to say, what I think Pasolini does, and for people who might still want to say that Desaad's book is better, I read Desaad's book, okay, The 120 Days of Sodom. It's unfinished. I mean, like, it's okay, I guess, for the first, until the second whatever, and then it just becomes a list of nefarious acts for hundreds of pages. It's like,
Have you read Justine, by the way? That's the one I read for college.
No, I haven't read Justine.
It's very interesting, but it also has that whole. I mean, Marquis de Sade, he wanted, from what I understand, complete destruction of humanity. That was kind of his whole. His whole
thing. Notice, but getting back, I want to get back to it. Is that the libertines in the book 120 Days of Sodom were like the ultimate alpha males.
They're Giga Chads, yeah.
They're the Giga Chads. I mean, they're described as having like penises that are just like a foot long, or it's like crazy, and they're just the Giga Chads who they're just so cool and blah, blah, blah. And they just want to just push it. But the libertines that Pasolini presents in
They're bug men. They're like
they're
modern
bug men.
bureaucrats.
They're impotent. And the thing is that this anarchy of power, this sort of ability to break these taboos, is the only thing that's giving them any sort of feeling. It's the only thing that gives them any sort of joy, that they're devoid of anything outside of other people's pain and or of their own pain. And it's this sort of like he's painting the modern intellectuals. And I mean, there's a reason why one is a bishop, one's a judge, one is I
politician,
forget
I think.
Yeah, politician, and they're higher up people, but he paints them not as these gigachads, but as bugmen, which is definitely a truer sort of.
And the courtice says the madams, they come in. It's very similar to what Paglia, when she talked about Desaad, and also Jonathan Bowden from the more far right has a similar thesis, talking about the sort of active violation of femininity, what Paglia called the female transvestite, where they take on this role of power because they're very important. They have to go every morning. It's like a ritual that they hear these debaucherous acts that these aristocrat women have done. It's very, and like you were saying, it's very theatrical. It's almost a staged performance.
And you think about it too. You think about how that can relate to our everyday life, right? Where we, like the media, right? Or I mean, because it's like the media, right? They're all sitting in this room watching this lady talk, and you could definitely draw parallels to people sitting in a room watching television, and how the language is used to sort of rewire their brains to be more accepting of them being violated later on. And it's like how media rewires our brains to be more accepting of our freedoms being taken away. That is the language sort of, they use the language to manipulate the masses, and that's definitely a part of the women. And the women are more eloquent. They're more like, people probably like to look at a woman dancing around, and more than a bug man, more than definitely a lot of the libertines, the creepy dude. It's like it's a nice face. It's a nice face to this evil.
Yeah. Well, there's all sorts of faces connected to evil that people experience in different ways. It could be a nice face of a beautiful lady. It could also be a face of someone who's seen as being very heroic. These things come in all different shapes and sizes, and I think it's going to be up to people to be able to discriminate in a very wise way when it comes to this, and try to not fall into peer pressure. That's the last thing that I want to leave people with. Don't fall into the peer pressure. Even if everybody who is around you thinks a certain thing, don't fall for that just so you can be, Mr. I'm cool on the internet here, Like, we have to keep things in perspective. And with that, I want to wish everybody a wonderful Oscar day, Oscar night, whatever. I don't know who you guys think is going to win. That's the last question. Who do you think is going to win? In the name of the dog. That's going to win. Woof, woof, right? Name the dog. All right.
Interrogate yourselves.
Who do you think is going to win, Slush?
I just said interrogate yourselves.
Interrogate yourselves.
Because just on the peer pressure thing, because it's like you might not even realize that you're thinking something that your peers think. That you might think that it's an original thought if you don't interrogate yourself.
Watch Andrei Rublev.
Yeah, there you go. I'm against the current thing, actually, so don't worry about it.
Well, Andrei Rublev, I don't even know if he existed. I mean, as far as the actual painting that was made back in the day, that one was done so much over and over again by other artists, so it's even difficult to say whether or not that movie, which is a great movie, whether it's
it is a great
true
movie.
to form. It is a great movie.
You should watch it. It's a great movie. Who cares if he existed, right? He exists in the myth.
Yeah, but it kind of fucks things up. For example, when you have Alexander Nevsky, who is being portrayed as this hero, like with the Germans, throwing the babies into the fire, and with their swords like the crosses, which I think kind of inspired George Lucas in a way, only to later on find out that the guy was selling out his, not even his own people, because he was a Swede, but he was selling out the Russians to the Golden Horde, in exchange for money, burning down villages that wouldn't pay the Mongols. Bad stuff.
The best thing we got out of Alexander Nevsky was a one-off joke in the movie Red Dawn, where after the Soviets take over that town in Colorado, you see on the movie theater marquee, it says, Alexander Nevsky, free every day.
And with that, I bid you guys farewell, and also be sure to check out Kino Corner on YouTube. Go there right now. You're going to have a streaming
in an hour and a half.
In an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Watch it, and then watch the Tim Heidecker on cinema thing, which is going to be very exciting. So Kino Corner and Slush, where can people find the great and powerful Slush?
You can find my content on youtube.com/SlushTV. I also have Twitter, but I don't really tweet that much anymore. But it's at @SlushTV_ if you want to see me tweet a bunch of nonsense. But yeah, watch my YouTube videos.
There we go. And subscribe to me on Twitter, twitter.com/LevPo. I just came out with a new artwork, which you guys probably not going to see right now because I did not configure the chat correctly. But you know what? I could put it in here just so the good people could see it. I could actually put it into the OBS. So this is my Twitter, and I'm going to attempt to heroically grab this file if I can. And while I'm doing that, I just want to thank everybody for being here, watching what you have been watching right now. It is a great joy to be a part of, whatever this internet thing is, whatever is being built right now. It is a great pleasure. Okay, here we go. I'm going to put Truster in my camera. This is the latest piece that I did. Here we go. Let's see. All right. Here, you can see him. This is Truster.
Oh, God.
What do you think of Truster, huh?
Fuck.
So this is a new crypto art that I did.
It's bouncing. That's disturbing.
So
It's
listen,
more disturbing than Salo.
you guys could actually invest.
No.
You guys can invest in Lev, so you can actually buy a real to life Truster NFT, which will be all yours.
Wait,
you
is
will
that
own
the
this.
Sonic enemy?
It's probably based on Robotnik in a way. I think I may have.
I meant like the chickens in like Sonic. Is it Sonic 2 or Sonic 3? I don't remember.
Okay, there was a chicken enemy which was on a like a tank-like thing. I don't remember. I think it was called Cluck.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I may have been inspired by it. I don't know. But anyway, I just posted a link to the Twitter post that I did about the art piece, as well as the super rare, because this is on super rare, which is a super exclusive crypto art thing. So you can purchase this on super rare. You can invest in Lev early. I'm going to be coming out with an NFT series of a certain animal, which is going to be much better than those damn dirty apes. You know, forget the apes. You got to invest in Lev. And this is the kind of creativity that you are going to be privy to once you invest in Lev. Those beautiful, joyful melons that are bouncing up and down. This is where Truster stores his memory, and there's like a whole biography about him. So anyway, read up on Truster, invest in Lev, follow me on Twitter, follow all these wonderful people here, and that's it. That's all I got to say. Have a wonderful Oscar day. And be sure to subscribe, patreon.com/breaktherules. You know it, you love it.
And Hollywood's run by Satanists.
Good night,
so
everybody.
goodbye.
You're not allowed to say that. That's a secret. Take care. All right, here we go.